Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Wraith Woven Stories. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. I'd planned a short solo trip into the backcountry, a chance to escape the relentless pulse of modern life and lose myself in the quiet austerity of nature. I was drawn, however, not just by the call of solitude, but by a peculiar rumor I'd heard whispered in local bars, of a forgotten cabin hidden deep within these woods, a relic of a past that had long been buried by time. No map marked its location, and locals claimed its existence was an urban legend. But legends, as I soon learned, often have kernels of disturbing truth. I set out on a crisp autumn morning, backpack loaded with a few essentials and a meticulously drawn route that I had planned from approximate coordinates. The forest welcomed me with a muted symphony of rustling leaves and distant bird calls. The deeper I ventured, the more I felt the pervasive solitude transform into a heavy, expectant quiet, as if the woods were holding their breath in anticipation. About 6 hours into my hike, fatigue mingled with an inexplicable sense of urgency. I found myself wandering off the beaten path, drawn by a faint glimmer of sunlight that filtered through a peculiar gap in the dense canopy. There, almost hidden by overgrown ferns and tangled vines, stood a narrow clearing. In the center, half swallowed by creeping ivy and shadows, was a dilapidated cabin that looked as though it had been abandoned for decades. I stopped dead in my tracks. My heart hammered as I approached the weathered structure. The cabin was constructed of dark, splintered logs, its once proud architecture now reduced to uneven walls and sagging roofs. Its windows, shattered and crusted with grime, seemed like the hollow eyes of a long-dead sentinel. The very sight of it sent a chill coursing through my veins. The path to the cabin was uneven and obscured by fallen branches. I hesitated at the threshold, an uneasy mix of dread and curiosity pulling me forward. As I stepped into the clearing, a metallic tang filled the air, a scent of decay and rust that seemed out of place in the otherwise crisp, invigorating forest. The overgrown grass reached up to my boots as if to warn me not to tread further, yet my determination and morbid fascination forced my feet onward. Inside, the cabin's interior was shrouded in gloom, lit only by stray beams of light that pierced through holes in the rotted roof. Dust motes danced in the slivers of sunlight, lending a surreal quality to the scene. The floorboards creaked underfoot, and every step I took sounded like a whisper of long-forgotten secrets. As I explored further, I discovered that the cabin comprised only a few small rooms, a living area with a collapsed fireplace, a narrow kitchen nook with a rusted sink, and a single bedroom. On a rickety table in the living area lay several objects that immediately attracted my attention. Among them was a half-burned photograph in an ornate frame. The faded image captured a family, a father, a mother, and 2 children, all wearing somber expressions as though they were guarding a secret. Their eyes, even in the decay of the photograph, seemed to plead for help. Next to it, I found a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and stained with what looked like old blood. The pages within were filled with frantic, nearly illegible script, interspersed with sketches of symbols I didn't recognize. I could feel my pulse quickening. There was an undeniable, almost palpable energy in this cabin, a residual imprint of lives lived in terror, sorrow, and perhaps even something darker. As I leafed through the journal, I discovered entries that detailed the life of a man who had once lived in seclusion in these woods. His words were desperate and erratic. He wrote of nightly visits by mysterious figures, of voices that whispered his name from the darkness, and of sinister rituals performed under the cold light of the moon. One entry mentioned a covenant of blood sealed within these very walls, a secret too dangerous to be left unsaid. The deeper I delved into the journal, the more my rational mind began to unravel. The narrative revealed that the cabin was once a meeting point for individuals who had forsaken society to worship something ancient and unspeakable. They believed that by forging a pact with this entity, they could gain immortality or an escape from the torments of mortal life. But something had gone horribly wrong. The accounts were filled with despair, betrayal, and the chilling realization that the entity they courted was not a benevolent savior, but a merciless force that demanded blood and souls in return. Late that afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent, I realized I'd lost track of time. The shadows grew longer, and an oppressive darkness started to seep into every corner of the clearing. I made a mental note to document every detail, every emotion that surged within me, feeling increasingly that I was stepping into someone else's nightmare, a nightmare that might not let go so easily. I decided to set up camp near the cabin. I was both repulsed and compelled by this place, repulsed by the weight of its tragic past and compelled by a need to understand it. In the relative safety of a clearing, I built a small fire, its flickering glow dancing against the backdrop of ancient trees. The fire provided a semblance of warmth, but the night air was filled with an unholy chill that seemed to seep through my very soul. Almost immediately, I began to notice things that defied natural explanation. At first, it was subtle, a scratching sound coming from the walls of the cabin that I couldn't attribute to any animal I knew of, a soft rustling that seemed too deliberate to be the wind. Then came the whispers. Faint, murmured voices, as though echoing from the depths of the forest. They seemed to speak in broken sentences, half-formed pleas and warnings that I could barely decipher. I sat rigid, straining to understand their message, my hand trembling as I clutched the journal. I tried to dismiss it as my imagination. After all, I'd spent hours alone in a decrepit cabin, and the isolation was bound to play tricks on my mind. But as the night deepened, the voices grew louder and seemed to come from everywhere at once. They called out names, some familiar, others utterly alien, and they spoke of darkness and the inevitability of fate. I felt as if the cabin itself were alive, its every creak and groan a lament for the terrible deeds committed within its walls. Around midnight, I couldn't take it anymore. An inexplicable dread urged me to return to my tent, away from the oppressive presence of the cabin. But as I turned to leave, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, a figure standing at the far end of the room, barely discernible in the gloom. It looked like a person, yet its features were blurred and shifting, as though it were a mirage conjured up by my mind. I froze, my throat tight with a scream that I could not let out. The figure began to move slowly, almost gliding towards me. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but my body was paralyzed by a mix of terror and disbelief. As it drew nearer, I could see that its eyes held a strange intensity, an ancient sorrow and resignation that seemed to pierce right through me. I couldn't tell if it was reaching out in an act of warning or if it was merely a specter of the past, doomed to wander these halls forever. I tried to speak, but only a choked whisper came out. Who? Are you? The figure halted a few feet away, as if deliberating whether my question was worth an answer. For what seemed like an eternity, we simply stared at each other in a silence that was more deafening than any scream could have been. Then, as silently as it had appeared, the figure dissipated into thin air, leaving behind a palpable void, a lingering presence that made my skin crawl. I spent the rest of that night huddled by the fire, listening to the murmurs of the unseen, my thoughts racing as I recalled the diary entries and the haunting images in the photograph. In the morning, I decided to investigate further. Something inside me demanded answers, even if it meant confronting the darkness head-on. Returning to the cabin, I meticulously searched every nook and cranny. In a hidden compartment beneath a loose floorboard in the living area, I discovered a small, rusted key. It was engraved with odd symbols that matched those in the journal, and it felt unnervingly warm to the touch, almost as if it had been waiting for me. My pulse accelerated as I realized this key might unlock something critical, a mystery that had long been locked away in time. With trembling hands, I made my way to a narrow door concealed behind a torn curtain in the bedroom. The door creaked open to reveal a small, cramped room that seemed frozen in a different era. The walls were lined with faded photographs, newspaper clippings, and handwritten letters. In the center of the room sat a wooden desk with an ornate mirror. As I gazed into the mirror, I didn't just see my own reflection. I saw fleeting images, faces of people long gone, their expressions etched with horror and longing. For a brief moment, I felt a surge of profound empathy, as though those souls were trapped in a never-ending cycle of suffering, desperate for release. I carefully lifted one of the letters and began to read. It detailed the tragic history of the cabin's inhabitants, a family shattered by grief when one member had gone missing under mysterious circumstances. The missing person was rumored to have been ensnared by the cult that once occupied the cabin, their fate sealed by a horrific pact. According to the letter, the family believed that if the wrong person were to find the cabin and disturb its sanctity, the vengeful spirit of the missing person would claim them as retribution. I shivered as I pieced together each detail. The intensity of my emotions was overwhelming. The air in that secret room felt charged, as though the very walls harbored the sorrow and rage of those lost souls. My mind reeled with questions. Was I merely an accidental intruder, or had fate guided me here to relive the final, horrifying chapter of a tormented family's legacy? As dusk began to fall, I felt an almost magnetic pull towards the mirror again. I could no longer ignore the sense of foreboding that clung to every inch of the cabin. The whispers had ceased for a while, and eerie silence settled in their place, broken only by the occasional creak of the settling wood. In the gathering gloom, I decided it was time to leave. The forest beyond the clearing no longer offered solace. It now seemed to be a labyrinth of haunted recollections that might claim me as their next victim. I gathered the journal, the key, and the few letters I could salvage, carefully tucking them into my backpack as tangible pieces of a mystery that was bigger than I had ever imagined. Every step I took back towards the clearing was accompanied by an oppressive sense of being watched, not only by the eyes of ancient trees, but by something far more malevolent lurking in the shadows. Outside, the woods had transformed into a realm of nightmares. The interplay of moonlight and darkness rendered every shape sinister. I stumbled through the underbrush with my heart pounding, each distant rustle or cracking twig sending shockwaves of terror through my mind. It wasn't long before I realized that I wasn't alone on this path. Footsteps echoed mine, sometimes matching my pace, sometimes trailing just behind. I quickened my speed, the forest suddenly full of unseen predators. In a desperate bid for escape, I veered off the narrow trail and plunged into a tangled mass of trees and brambles. The oppressive darkness seemed to close in on me, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear a low, guttural sound, a sound that could only belong to something not entirely human. Every instinct urged me to run faster, my legs moving on their own as I tried to outrun the looming nightmare. After what felt like an eternity of frantic running, I burst into a small clearing. There, the forest opened up, revealing a moonlit pond with glassy, undisturbed water. For a fleeting moment, I felt a hint of relief. I crouched near the water's edge, panting and glancing around nervously, convinced that any movement in the dark woods would signal the approach of my pursuer. The silence of the pond was eerily perfect, until I noticed my own reflection ripple and blur as if something had disturbed it from behind. Slowly, I turned, and there in the gloom stood a gaunt figure draped in tattered clothing. Its eyes glowed faintly under the moon's pale light, and its elongated fingers pointed directly at me. I dared not speak, terrified that any sound would shatter the fragile tranquility and bring upon me a fate beyond imagining. The figure advanced slowly, each step deliberate and heavy with a sense of inevitability. In that agonizing moment, memories of the diary entries and the heartfelt letters came flooding back. I understood that I was not simply witnessing the tragedies of the past. I was part of an unbroken chain linking the lost souls of the cabin to the present. The figure, whether spirit or something else entirely, was a guardian of secrets too terrible to be forgotten. It reached out with a trembling hand, as if inviting me to uncover the truth hidden in the darkness. I felt a strange compulsion that overrode my natural instinct to flee, a need to understand what had been set in motion long ago. My body slowed, and I met the figure's gaze. In the reflection of its eyes, I saw a lifetime of grief, betrayal, and a desperate hope for redemption. Then, as silently as it had appeared, the spectral figure faded into the night. I was left alone by the pond, shaken to my core and grappling with the realization that the boundary between the living and the dead was thinner here than anywhere else. Clambering to my feet, I resolved that I could not abandon the truth that the cabin and its haunted past demanded to be understood. The trek back through the forest was a trial of endurance and willpower. Every snap of twig underfoot was a reminder of unseen eyes tracking my progress. When I finally emerged from the oppressive darkness of the woods and back onto a faint, nearly forgotten logging road, the break of dawn was my only solace. In the days that followed, I pored over the journal and the salvaged letters, trying to piece together the tragic timeline of the cabin's occupants. I learned that the missing member of that family had been involved with a secretive sect that believed in transcending mortal existence through forbidden rituals. Their hopes had twisted into madness, and when the ritual went awry, it did not end with death, but with a curse, a lingering presence bound to the site and to anyone who dared disturb its slumber. I contacted local historians and delved into archived records, finding whispers of these events in dusty county documents and town folklore. The deeper I dug, the more it became evident that what I had experienced was not an isolated incident, but a thread woven into a fabric of recurring tragedies spanning generations. Every night since my escape, I have dreamed of that cabin. I see myself wandering its gloomy corridors, hearing the soft whispers of voices that beg for release, and witnessing spectral figures silently reenact the horrors of that forgotten past. I can't shake the feeling that I am now linked to the fate of that place. I have become a reluctant guardian of its secrets, burdened with the knowledge that some mysteries are perhaps best left undisturbed. Every new day is colored by a lingering dread and an almost inevitable pull back to that clearing in the woods. Even now, as I sit before my computer recounting these events, I can still smell the metallic tang of decay, see the brittle image of the family's pleading eyes, and feel the oppressive weight of the cabin's sorrow. I have returned to civilization physically, yet a part of me remains forever in those dark woods. The memory of that spectral figure at the pond is a permanent scar on my psyche, a reminder that some places and some secrets can never truly be left behind. I live with the constant question, was I merely an unwitting trespasser, or did fate lead me to that cabin to resolve something unfinished? Perhaps one day I will return, not as a frightened wanderer, but as a seeker of truth willing to confront the darkness at its source. Until that time, I carry with me the echo of that night, a chilling symphony of sorrow and despair that haunts my every waking moment. The cabin in the clearing remains an enigma, a silent testament to horrors past and a constant reminder that in the depths of the woods, some secrets do not want to be discovered. I now know that some horrors are not confined to the pages of forgotten diaries or the whispered legends of old-timers. They lurk in the dark recesses of time and space, waiting patiently for someone to stir them awake. And as the nights grow longer and the shadows creep in earlier with each passing autumn, I can't help but wonder if I am being watched still. If the forest ever truly lets go of its captive souls, or if I am destined to walk alongside them for the rest of my days. For now, I have survived that terrible night, but the whispers continue in my dreams, and the spectral face at the pond lingers in my mind. The memory of that cursed cabin, its forgotten legacy of despair, and the unyielding pull of its dark mystery will remain with me, a permanent part of who I am. until the day I finally faced it again. I never thought brake work would get under my skin. I'd been a mechanic long enough to know every hiss of air, every click of ratchets, but nothing prepared me for that night. It started like any other, a stack of service orders, the hum of fluorescence, the smell of solvent and rubber. Then the calls began. The first was a late-night tow. A battered sedan pulled in, brakes screeching like metal on glass. I hauled it into Bay 2 beneath the yellow glow of the work light. Its rotors were scorched, gouged as if something had clawed them from the inside. I shrugged it off as wear and tear. Somebody's kid had probably held the pedal to the floor, testing limits. I jacked it up, pulled the wheel off, and reached into the drum. It was cool to the touch, too cool, like the metal had soaked up the night's chill and refused to warm. That's when I first heard it, a tiny giggle echoing from below the car. I froze, glove dangling from my fingertips. The laugh was childlike, 3 notes rising in mischief, but empty, no joy behind it, just a hollow echo. I twisted my head for a better look, and my spine seized. The drum was empty. No parts, no tools, just darkness curling inside like smoke. I shook it off. Probably the radio speaker acting up, or my nerves fraying after too many late shifts. I finished the inspection, reassembled the brakes, torqued everything down tight. No harm done, I told myself. But then I noticed the caliper bolts. One was undone. I tightened them all. I remembered each torque spec by feel, a habit after years in the trade. My hands shook as I reinstalled it. The truck rolled away, wheels whispering over asphalt, and I wiped my brow, convinced I'd imagined the giggle. But I didn't imagine the second call. 2 days later, a minivan limped in on 3 wheels. Rear brakes locked solid. Smoke seeped from the wheel well. Kids on a school trip, the driver said. I recognized the model, same rear drum setup as the sedan. I drained the old fluid, cleaned the cylinders, and refitted new shoes. I left one caliper bolt unthreaded by an inch, just enough to keep tension off. It felt safer that way. When I started the pedal test, the brake light on the dash flickered. The radio fizzed with static, then a lullaby a mother might hum to herself, soft, sweet, backwards. My reflection in the windshield rippled like water. I blinked, and it was gone. The lullaby stopped. The van's brake light blinked once, twice, then 0. I sighed. Probably electrical gremlins. I handed the keys back to the driver. She thanked me, and her kids peered at me through fogged glass, their faces pressed flat against the window, eyes wide as if they'd seen a ghost. I waved and tried to smile, because what else do you do when children stare at you like you're the devil's apprentice? That night, I lay in bed listening to the crickets, the weight of my covers pressing down. I'd left that one bolt loose. I told myself it was fine, but in the back of my head, I could still hear the giggle, crisp as ice. The third call came at 3:07 a.m. When I got to the shop, there was no van or sedan, just my old bulletin board, pinned with schedules and faded photos of smiling customers. Under the fluorescent lights, I noticed something, a small smear of oily footprints leading from Bay 2 to the back exit. I followed them, breath quickening. They trailed off into the night, straight into the pitch black lot. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it across the cracked pavement. The beam landed on a wheel rim, half buried in gravel, still warm. I recognized it, from the minivan. I stooped to pick it up and froze. Carved into the metal was a child's handprint, 3 inches wide, fingers splayed. It was wet, tacky. My stomach twisted. I stumbled back, heart pounding. I threw it down and ran inside, slamming the door behind me. At dawn, the owner of the shop found me in a corner of the office, pale and shaking, rattling off the stories in a breathless stutter. He pressed coffee on me and offered to call someone else to handle brake jobs. I refused. I needed to finish what I'd started. Needed to know. That afternoon, I donned fresh gloves, cleared the lot, and pried open Bay 2. My tools lay neatly on the bench exactly as I'd left them. The radio crackled. The lullaby. I flicked it off. Silence. I worked without music, without phones, without company. I stripped down a wrecked flatbed towing truck from the salvage yard, one I knew I could overhaul completely. Every drum, every cylinder, every brake line felt like a puzzle piece I'd been too afraid to touch. I examined each component under the flicker of my headlamp. Nothing amiss. Everything in specification. But I followed my instinct. I left one caliper bolt half-threaded. I refused to look into the drum while I twisted my neck. Instead, I used my reflection in a mirror, angling it so I could see without turning. The metal surface rippled unnaturally, but revealed no ghosts. And if a child's laugh dared to break the silence, I dropped my tools and ran, eyes forward, feet fast. By nightfall, the flatbed rolled out of the bay with solid, silent wheels. I watched it disappear down Highway 365 until its taillights winked out. The air felt lighter, as though I'd exhaled decades of dread. I don't know why these brakes carry a curse or why the rules work, but I obey them, no matter how absurd they sound, because I felt the cold shadow of unwritten consequences creeping across my back, and I promised myself I wouldn't let the next mechanic pay the price. Now I finish late shifts with my toolbox close and my heart closer. I leave that one caliper bolt loose until sunrise. I never look into the drum by twisting my head. And if I ever hear a child's laugh beneath a car again, I'll drop everything and run without turning back. Strange rules. Always leave one caliper unbolted until sunrise. Never look into the brake drum while twisting your head. If you hear a child's laugh in the pit, drop your tools and run. Don't look back. I remember the night I first met the Whisper. It was just past midnight, the garage silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and the distant thump of my own heart. I'd been working third shift long enough to expect almost anything: cars rolling in with dead batteries, alternators fried by drag racers, the occasional customer too drunk to remember where they left their wheel nuts. But nothing had prepared me for the day the old Ford F-150 rumbled into Bay 3. The pickup looked ancient, as though it had crawled out of a time capsule. Faded hunter green paint cracked by sun and rain, a makeshift bumper of welded scrap metal, and tires so bald the steel belts peeked through. The driver, a gaunt man in a moth-eaten coat, slid out without a word and pointed at the engine. No paperwork, no story, just that haunted look in his eyes, like he'd already seen too much. I nodded and raised the hood. Inside the engine bay, everything was coated in years of crud. Oil had pooled in the crevices, mixed with rust and road salt to form a gritty paste. The valves gaped like tired jaws, the spark plugs looked fused by heat, and the hoses were brittle as dry bone. Yet when I clipped the compression tester onto the first cylinder, the gauge read 30%, far below the 200 I expected. I frowned, jiggled the hose, and tried again. Still 30. The man watched me, silent as a tomb. I moved down the line, 60 psi, then 40, then back to 30. All of them lifeless. But the moment I tested the last cylinder, the air in the shop shifted. The gauge hissed, then screamed upward, rocketing past 200, 300 psi. The needle slapped the stop so hard it quivered. I yanked my hand back, nearly toppled the tester, and heard something. A muffled scream, swallowed by the rush of trapped air. It wasn't the gauge. It echoed around me, wet and urgent, as if someone were buried somewhere beneath the concrete, calling to be heard. My skin crawled, and I went still, eyes locked on the trembling needle. I remembered the old instructions: They'd always drilled them into me at the tech school. Release the tester's valve in 3 quick clicks. No more, no less. Never dump it all at once. I swallowed, reached for the valve, and clicked. 1, 2, 3. The pressure bled away in controlled whooshes, and the scream cut off as abruptly as it began. Silence returned, heavy as a funeral shroud. The man still stood at the edge of the bay, hands in his pockets, staring at me. He nodded once, turned, and opened the driver's door. I leaned in, asked if he wanted the brakes or the plugs checked next, but he was gone. The seat was empty. No footprints led away from the truck, and the rear window reflected nothing but dark sky. I slammed the hood shut and tried to shake off the chill crawling up my spine. Over the next week, the old pickup came back every night at 2:13 a.m. Always empty, always with the hood open. I tried to ignore it, but each time I slapped the tester onto a cylinder, the gauge trembled, the whisper returned, and I had to follow the rules or invite the whisper in. It began to feel like a twisted ritual. Arrive just after closing, hook up the tester, hold my breath as the piston compressed, click the valve 3 times to set it free. Once, in my haste, I turned the gauge's reset knob counterclockwise instead of clockwise. The needle spun backward, plunging into negative numbers, and that's when I heard laughter, dry, hollow, like scraps of bone rattling in an empty chest. The door slammed shut behind me, though no wind was blowing. The lights flickered. I bolted for the bay doors and flung them open. Outside, the lot was empty except for my shadow, stretched long under the floodlight. I didn't sleep for 2 nights. Then came the night I almost lost my mind. The gauge shot past 400 psi, hissing like a demon in a coffin. The whisper burst forth, raw and desperate, and the air pressure in the shop flattened my lungs. I tried clicking the valve, 1, 2, 3, but nothing happened. The gauge trembled, its glass housing shivering with malicious glee. I fumbled at the valve stem, every sense screaming at me that I was failing. That scream became a roar. I felt the air around me warp, the walls bend inward. And then I did the only thing I could. I struck a match. I'd stopped smoking years ago, but that night I dug a pack from my glove box and struck the match against my work boots. The flame flickered, then burned steady. I drew deeply on the cigarette, and a strange calm settled over me. The tester's hiss softened, the needle stilled at 250 psi, and the roar faded into memory. I stood there in the glow of my cigarette, kit in hand, breathing smoke in relief, until the needle finally dropped to 0. I tossed the cigarette into the metal ashtray. It smoldered for a second, then died. I flicked my lighter shut and watched the spark vanish. The whisper never returned. I returned the tester to its rack and shut the hood. Leaning against the fender, I stared at the dull headlights, half expecting to see the man's gaunt face pressed against the glass. But the cab was empty, silent, as if it had never existed. That was 2 months ago. I haven't seen the pickup since. But the compression tester sits on my bench, its glass lens clouded with fine cracks, the valve stem scratched from my frantic clicks. Sometimes, late at night, I hear it whisper when a customer demands a quick pressure check. My hands shake, and I remember that scream, trapped like a soul in the steel gauge. I've learned to follow the rules without thinking. I always release the valve in 3 quick clicks. I never reset the gauge counterclockwise. And if the needle trembles above 150 psi, I light a cigarette, 3 puffs, no more. Because if I don't, that whisper will ride home with me, unseen, unheard, until it's in the seat beside me, breath tickling my ear. I don't know who that man was, or what I freed in that engine bay. Maybe a spirit bound in steel, maybe a remnant of every engine I've ever tested. All I know is that I obey the rules now, because I value my sanity more than my pride. The night shift has enough ghosts already. Strange rules. Always release the tester's valve in 3 quick clicks. Never reset the gauge counterclockwise. If the needle trembles above 150 psi, you must light a cigarette, or the guest will ride home with you. I didn't expect much when the sedan rolled in under the dull yellow glow of the bay light. Just another tourist with engine trouble, shivering in the cold Arkansas night. But as soon as I saw the license plate, 3 letters, a dash, CU, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. It sat there, silent, wheels straight, engine off, as if it had been waiting for me. I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped out into the chill. The air smelled of damp asphalt and decaying leaves. Not a soul in sight. I approached the driver's side, hand resting casually on my wrench. The door was locked. No surprise, tourists often did that. But when I glanced at the hood ornament, a little chrome figure of a winged wheel, I caught its reflection in the glass. My own face stared back at me, pale and drawn, but there was something else in those eyes. A weight, a hollowness I hadn't felt in years. Just an old mirror, I muttered, pushing that thought away. I popped the hood, expecting the usual array of hoses and belts. Instead, everything gleamed. Too clean. The engine bay looked polished, like someone had stripped out all the wear and tear, leaving only a factory fresh shine. No rust, no oil stains, no cobwebs. I frowned, leaned closer, and that's when I saw her. A reflection in the underside of the hood, an outline of a woman, hair dripping wet, lips parted as if breathing slow and deep. When I jerked back, she vanished. The hood was as empty as before. My rag slipped from my hand. I shook my head. Late night, too many coffees. I grabbed my flashlight and swept it over the engine. I checked fluids, tightened clamps, replaced a cracked hose. All routine stuff. But every time I polished a surface, I felt her gaze, like the tarnish I removed scraped away a barrier between our worlds. By the time I closed the hood, my gloves were slick and my heart pounded so loudly I was sure the car could hear it. I went to the passenger window to peer inside, catch the driver's eye, ask them what happened. The glass was so spotless I nearly mistook it for a mirror. I leaned in and I saw her again myself, but stretched, elongated, mouth twisting into an unnatural smile. I blinked and saw the empty seat behind me, but the smear of fog on the glass told me someone had been breathing there. "Y'all need a cab?" I called, half laughing. No answer. The lot was silent. I circled to the front. The hood ornament caught the bay light, throwing a fractured gleam across the concrete. I reached out, fingertip grazing the metal, and it felt warm, like fresh blood. My reflection shimmered there too, flickering between my face and hers. I jerked away, nearly tripping over my toolbox. My radio sputtered to life behind me. Static at first, then a voice, soft, a woman's voice humming a lullaby in a language I didn't know. I froze, listening to the melody swirl around the bay. It wound through the air, tugging at my bones. I tried to switch the radio off, but the dial spun freely as if my hand passed through it. The song grew louder, overlapping on itself, until it was all I could hear. My vision blurred. In the radio's glow, I saw her, tall, beautiful, skin pale as moonlight, hair plastered to her cheeks. She hovered at the edge of the frame, half in shadow, half in light. There was no body, just the illusion of one, like smoke shaped by longing. "She's here," I whispered. My voice cracked. The reflection in the hood ornament split, showing 2 of me, one terrified, one curious. My heart screamed at me to run, but my feet stayed planted. That woman in the engine bay, in the mirror, she was waiting. I turned away and grabbed my wrench. I'd been taught to keep calm, focused on the work. I picked a harmless task, tightened the alternator belt. My hands trembled as I wound the bolt. Then I heard it. A soft tap, 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 like nails rapping on glass. I spun around. The windshield was covered in droplets, though there'd been no rain. Each drop was perfect, spherical, suspended on the outside like tears frozen mid-fall. My reflection stared back at me through that watery veil, her lips moving. I leaned closer and heard the faintest whisper. "See me." The words matched the license plate. I slammed my palm against the glass. The drops shattered into mist. My hand hit nothing but cold metal. I staggered back, gulping air. The car's driver door clicked open of its own accord. A sliver of darkness spilled out. I knew touching it was taboo. I'd learned rules early in this business. Still, I walked toward it. My reflection moved in the window, taking one step closer. Its hand pressed to the glass, mirroring my advance. I hesitated. The engine bay in the mirror, a perfect world where I didn't have my arthritis, where my daughter was still alive, beckoned. She smiled at me, warm and beckoning. It was my dreams, amplified. And I reached out. My fingers hovered over the handle. Then, something snapped inside me. An echo of a warning from my grandfather, who taught me about curses. I yanked my hand back. Tools rattled on the cart. The radio crackled and died. The lullaby stopped. Silence. I backed away until I bumped against the wall. My heart hammered. The radiator cap popped in the engine bay. Steam hissed. The woman in the mirror appeared behind me, her face pressed at the window, eyes glowing gold. She mouthed, "See me." I ran. I didn't look back. I slammed shut the bay doors as if sealing her in. The garage was darker than before. My flashlight flickered. In the beam, I saw the hood ornament lying on the floor, rolled like a fallen talisman. I picked it up. The chrome was dulled, as if someone had sanded it smooth. In its curved surface, I saw only myself, eyes wide, mouth set in a grim line. I left the license plate mirror and the car where it was. I never saw it again, even when I checked the lot the next morning. But I carried that hood ornament everywhere. I polished it just enough to see my face, not too much, not too little. At night, I avoided mirrors. My reflection was a door I didn't dare open. Sometimes, when the wind howls through the garage, I swear I hear that lullaby, faint and yearning. I feel a weight at my back, as if someone's standing there, waiting for me to turn. But I never do. I learned that some reflections hide more than they reveal. Strange rules. Do not polish the hood ornament past a dull gleam. Never wipe down the windshield after nightfall. If your reflection speaks first, you're already gone. I never should have stepped onto that escalator after 11:11 p.m. The moment I felt the metal ridges slide beneath my feet, cold and impossibly fast, I knew something was terribly wrong, like falling through a crack in reality where gravity reversed and logic unraveled. But my shift as a night janitor at Willow Creek Mall in rural Alabama left me no choice. That was the hour the central escalator flipped direction, carrying anyone foolish enough to ride it upward into a place that shouldn't exist. Ever since I was hired 6 months ago, I'd heard whispers among the overnight staff about the Mirror Mall. They said that after the last chime of the clock tower at 11:11, the escalator steps would fold back toward the ceiling, beckoning with a soft mechanical sigh that sounded almost alive. You were supposed to watch from the landing, count to 3, and then hit the override switch hidden behind a metal panel at the base. But if you slipped, if you even stood on that trembling ribbon of steel as it carried you skyward, you'd vanish. And sooner or later, something would return. I didn't believe it, of course. Urban legends feed on isolation and boredom, and the nights in that place were long. By 2 a.m., the last of the late shoppers had trudged off into the empty parking lot, headlights disappearing like fireflies in the black. The store lights dimmed to a ghostly half glow, and the only sound was the hum of the HVAC rattling down the corridors. That was when boredom turned to dread, rarely at the same moment, but often close enough to blur one into the other. My first real warning came 2 nights before the incident. I was wiping down the Formica counter of the closed bookstore when I heard the escalator's motor whine, an odd pitch, like a wounded animal calling. I glanced up at the digital clock. 11:10. I should have run to the panel, pulled off the metal grate, and hit the switch. Instead, I froze, mesmerized. The handrail reversed direction with a gentle tug, and the steps began their inexorable climb. I watched them rise until they vanished into the darkness above. 3 minutes later, after the whine ceased and the escalator settled back into normal operation, I found footprints on the landing, a single set of wet impressions, toes splayed, leading up but never coming down. I followed them to the top floor, heart hammering, but there was nothing there. No broken glass, no stain of drying water, no sign of who might have slipped away. The only evidence was a faint, high-pitched chime, like a bell too small to ring. I reported it to my supervisor, an aging retiree named Earl who did security rounds in cargo shorts and a windbreaker 3 sizes too big. He pressed a hand to his temple like he was warding off a headache. "You're tired, kid," he said. "Get some rest." But he never asked again. No late-night patrols, no second glance. The mall's management ignored every glitch in the cameras, every power surge, every unaccounted minute on the logs. They didn't care if the escalator occasionally ate a shopper. It was an expense pencil line below, redecorating in their spreadsheets. Still, I felt responsible. I set up my own routine. At 11:09, I went to the bottom of the escalator, unscrewed the panel, and watched the gears spin behind the plastic. At 11:11 exactly, I hit the override and listened for the mechanical sigh that never failed to send shivers up my spine. The lights flickered. The motor reversed. Then, 4 seconds later, I hit the switch again and the escalator ground back to its proper direction. I thought I was safe. But that final night, I miscalculated. I lost track of time while chasing a spilled coffee canister across the food court. By the time I slid past the newsstand and saw the escalator belt sliding upward, it was 11:12. My feet were already on the ridged treads before I realized. There was no panel in my hand, no time to even scream. The next thing I knew, I was standing in a mall that looked like Willow Creek, but wasn't. The fluorescent bulbs glowed pure white, the tiled floor was spotless, and the air smelled of oranges and firewood. Nothing like the stale popcorn scent I was used to. I stared at my reflection in the mirrored wall that led to the food court and froze. The person looking back at me wasn't me. His eyes were deeper set, the hollows under his cheekbones too pronounced. His hair was longer, darker, and his uniform was the same but wrong, inverted colors, logo embroidered on the opposite side. He raised a brow, cocked his head, and whispered, "Took you long enough." Those words were out of my mouth, but not my voice. It sounded distant, like someone speaking underwater. My knees gave way. The escalator belt below me hummed quietly, but behind me, there shouldn't be another. I turned and saw him, my mirror self, standing exactly where I would have been. His mouth curved into a sad, mocking grin. I tried to step off, but my boots were glued to the moving steps. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the sickly sweet hum of machinery. My reflection extended a hand, not to help, but to pull. "Come on," he said, voiced like a chorus of whispers. "We're already late." Adrenaline snapped through me. I kicked backward, tearing my foot free, and fell onto the smooth tile at the bottom level. The world pitched. I landed on my elbow, pain slicing up my arm like ice. I rolled away just as the escalator sped back down to its normal function with a final shudder. My reflection was gone. Above, The mall clock chimed midnight, 3 strikes past the bewitching hour. I scrambled to the broken panel, yanked it open, and slammed the override switch. Sparks flew. The gears ground to a halt. The lights dimmed. Everything fell silent. I bolted for the nearest exit, bursting through the glass doors just as the night breeze swallowed me. I didn't stop running until the parking lot flicked under fluorescent bulbs. The echo of those footsteps, mine and not mine, followed me to my car. The next day, I told Earl I was sick, food poisoning, bad stomach. He gave me a look, but didn't press. The mall kept its secrets. The escalator functioned normally, as if nothing had happened. Cameras showed no anomaly, logs recorded on schedule, and the panel resembled a factory scene, no signs of tampering. I never saw my mirror self again. I returned once to finish my shift, even though each step across the concourse felt like walking on graves. At 11:10, I set my watch and approached the escalator. Heart pounding, I opened the panel. The gears were unblemished, as though they'd never eaten human flesh. I punched the override. But at 11:11, instead of reversing, the escalator rumbled as if groaning under its own weight. The steps trembled, and for a heart-stopping moment, I looked up and thought I saw dozens of boots, spirits of the lost, climbing in perfect formation toward the ceiling. Their outlines were translucent, blurred, but unmistakable. Then the escalator jerked back into normalcy. The lights flickered, and the watcher's clock ticked forward. I closed the panel and walked away. We all did. But every night when I'm alone in the storage room, I swear I can hear that soft mechanical sigh, the pleading scrape of metal, and the distant mocking whisper, "We're already late." They say the mall is haunted by forgotten souls. I know better. It's haunted by the mall itself, an endless bargain of flesh and steel. And the escalator is its whispered invitation, one you can't refuse if you lose count or lose your nerve. Because once you step on, you're not climbing to the food court, you're climbing into another world. And one day, you'll come down, but it won't be you. It will be something that looks like you, and it will be hungry for the next fool who follows the rules too late. It began with the chanting, soft and distant, carried on the wind like a promise or a warning. The 5 of us had driven into the forest at dusk, tires crunching over gravel, headlights cutting swaths of orange through the gathering twilight. We'd come for solitude, for the thrill of discovery. An ancient monastery, left to ruin centuries ago, its stones moss-clad and half-swallowed by brambles. My camera, slung around my neck, felt heavy with anticipation. Maybe we'd document the crumbling arches, the faded frescoes rumored to still ghost the chapel walls. Instead, we found something dark and patient, waiting just beyond the tree line. We pitched our tents in a clearing rimmed by oak and yew, the ruins standing like hulking silhouettes against a charcoal sky. The air smelled of damp earth and decay. I lit the fire, and the flames sputtered upward, chasing away the shadows that clung to broken masonry. Beneath the skeletal remains of the cloister, we could hear the low hum of insects, the rustle of leaves, and if we strained to listen, the murmur of voices. "Probably just wind," Mark said, tossing another log onto the fire. He propped his boots against a smoldering ember, wiggling his toes. "Old buildings like this breathe." Lena shrugged and ran a finger over the moss-slick stone, disturbing a glossy slug. "Still gives me the creeps." I adjusted the lens on my camera. "Let's split up tomorrow. We'll meet back here for lunch, check out the nave, then hike to that waterfall." They both looked at me, the same flicker of unease in their eyes. We'd done weekend trips before, climbing abandoned mills, spelunking in caves, but nothing had ever felt quite like this. Night deepened, and the forest closed in. We played cards in the firelight, laughter thin around the edges. My phone buzzed, no signal, but a flashlight beam glowed in the gloom beyond our tents, as though someone stood watching. I stared until it vanished, Did you guys see that? I blurted. Maybe a lost hiker, Lena whispered. Or a prank, Mark said. He stood, stretched, and ambled toward the ruins, curiosity pushing him forward. I grabbed my jacket. Wait up. We crossed the clearing toward the chapel's collapsed doorway. My breath puffed white, and footsteps crunched on fallen stones. Inside, moonlight filtered through gaping windows, revealing littered pews and shattered pillars. A chill settled over me. Then we heard it again, a soft, rhythmic chanting, like many voices singing in unison. The pitch was low and guttural, words unintelligible but ancient. Mark stiffened. This isn't right, he muttered. We edged deeper, flashlights sweeping across walls carved with angels and saints, their faces eroded by time. The chanting grew louder, resonant, filling the nave with an otherworldly pulse. I raised my camera, fingers trembling. At the altar stood 5 figures in hooded robes, their faces hidden in shadow. They turned as one, the chant dying on their lips. I flicked the flash, and the beam revealed gaunt faces, skin whitened as parchment, eyes shining like wet pebbles. Guests, one said, voice hollow as a crypt. My heart itched. They slipped their hoods back to reveal emaciated monks, garments threadbare and stained with ash. Something uneasy twisted in my gut. We brought offerings, the tallest murmured, holding out a charred wooden bowl. Inside, the ember of a smoking candle wavered. Lena stumbled back. We didn't know anyone would be here. The monk smiled, a fraction, revealing teeth like ivory shards. You are welcome to join us. We backed toward the entrance. The chanting resumed, slow and hypnotic, and I felt my limbs go heavy, my mind swimming in a fog. The flame in the bowl grew, casting dancing shadows that writhed against the walls like living things. I yanked Lena's arm. Let's go. Outside, the empyrean of stars was gone, swallowed by a roiling black ceiling of cloud. The fire in our clearing had died to embers. We heard footsteps behind us, soft, deliberate, 5 sets of footsteps echoing across the stones. We ran. My flashlight swung wildly, illuminating broken columns, toppled statues, and beneath them, traces of fresh footprints in the moss. They were oddly defined, crisp as if pressed yesterday, not centuries ago. At the edge of the clearing, Mark grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. The monks stood in a semicircle, their eyes fixed on us, mouths moving in silent prayer. Beneath their cloaks, ribs knotted and thighs hollowed, as though their bodies had been drained of flesh. One raised a gnarled hand and beckoned. I felt it deep in the part of me that knew fear. Stay, the voice whispered. We tore past the tents, up the gravel road, adrenaline slurping through our veins. The forest seemed to stretch on forever, each step swallowed by the hush. Branches snagged at my clothes like fingers. I fell twice, scrabbling to my feet, chest ripping with each breath. Behind me, receding but never gone, I heard the chant, soft, insistent, promising reunion. We didn't stop until the headlights of Lena's truck pierced the gloom, bright and surreal. She gunned the engine, and we tumbled inside, slamming doors shut. In the rearview, I swore I saw a figure standing at the road's edge, robes brushing the gravel, head bowed. Back in town, the morning light felt brutal, too white, too honest. We huddled in a diner, sipping bitter coffee. None of us spoke for a long time. Did anyone else notice, Lena finally whispered, that their robes looked like they were made of skin? Mark paled. I thought I was imagining it. I thumbed through my camera. The first few photos were of moss and fallen beams, but then came the flash shot of the monks. The image revealed their gaping eye sockets, the furrows in their cheeks like dried clay, and the dark hollows beneath their sternums, holes that pulsed with shadow. Let's delete these, Lena said, voice cracking. But I couldn't. In the back of my mind, I heard the chant, waiting, promising acceptance. That night, I lay awake, eyes open to darkness. Every rustle on the street outside sounded like a footstep in the forest. My phone vibrated, a text from an unknown number. "We await your return." I stared at it until the screen went dark, pulse pounding. I tossed and turned, imagining the monastery's silhouette framed by fog, the monks' invitation echoing through time. The next day, I drove back to the site alone. I told myself it was to retrieve my camera, to erase the evidence. But as I turned off the highway and onto the gravel road, I felt a pull, like gravity. The forest welcomed me with damp arms. I parked where we once camped. The clearing was overgrown, as though abandoned for centuries. The fire ring had been reclaimed by ferns. I stepped forward, heart hammering, until I stood before the ruins once more. No chanting greeted me, only silence, thick and expectant. I lifted my camera, hesitated, then clicked a single flash. In the flash's glare, I thought I saw them, the monks, lined up in the nave, waiting. Their eyes glimmered in the sudden light, pale and unblinking. The flash died. The ruins were empty. The echo of their presence lingered like a sigh. I slipped my camera into my bag and turned to leave, but the air shifted. A coldness rolled in, and from the shattered archway came the murmur of chants, distant, sure, unending. I froze. The monks' voices swelled, rising in devotion. In that moment, I understood what they offered. Not salvation, but oblivion. Not peace, but transformation. Acceptance into their silent brotherhood, bound by ash and shadow, where flesh decayed, but the spirit endured. My legs moved before my mind could protest. I stepped across the threshold, heart racing. The ruined stones closed behind me, and the night swallowed me whole. Behind me, the forest exhaled. The chanting resumed, soft as a lullaby, welcoming its newest guest into eternal communion. I never imagined my nightly commute would become a waking nightmare, but here we are. I've always taken the #42 bus home from my late shift at the diner, humming its engine like a faithful old dog beneath the streetlights. My stop is a small curb next to an overgrown lot, marked only by a faded wooden bench and a half-broken lamppost that sputters on stormy nights. I'd never thought much of it, just another anonymous waypoint between two dead-end jobs, until last Tuesday, when I noticed the laminated sign leaning against the bench, propped between two broken fluorescent tubes. It looked official enough, white cardstock, professionally laminated, but its message was anything but. 4 bullet points, each marked with an ominous little diamond, titled "Midnight Bus Stop Safety Guidelines." Underneath, in crisp black font, were directives that made no sense, at least, not until they proved impossible to ignore. I stared at them for a full minute, the wind tugging at the corners of the sign, before I even tried to process it. Don't sit, only stand on the painted X. If headlights flare from the east, close your eyes until they fade. Never check your phone past the second chime of the station clock. If someone in a black coat steps off the bus, don't follow them. At first, I assumed it was prank, maybe posted by bored kids or some local creep with too much time on their hands. I half expected it to vanish the next night, but it stayed, taped now to the back of the bench with weathered duct tape. The painted X was faint, a barely perceptible widening in the concrete, its white paint half ground away by years of rain and foot traffic. I squinted at it and realized I passed right over that mark dozens of times, oblivious to its existence. That night, I decided to test it. On my shift, I clocked out at 11:50 p.m., bell tinkling as I locked the diner door. Moonlight laced through the trees lining the sidewalk as I made my way to the bus stop. The sign glinted under the street lamp, and I paused, folding the document like a curious archaeologist. Standing on the X felt silly at first, like a hen telling me to watch my step, but I shifted my weight until my feet felt centered. A sudden breeze rustled dead leaves across the pavement, and I heard a faint hiss, like static on an old speaker. At exactly midnight, a white van roared past from the east. Its headlights blazed like twin suns at my chest, and I realized the second rule wasn't a joke. Heart pounding, I squeezed my eyes shut. The glare hammered my eyelids, pushing tears out in a thin stream. I counted 1, 2, and on 3, the light vanished, swallowed by the night as the van disappeared around the corner. I opened my eyes and blinked into darkness. The bench, the lamp post, even the sign all felt distant, like underwater reflections. I exhaled and glanced at my phone clock. 12:01. The station clock overhead ticked once, then twice, and at the second chime I, almost reflexively, reached for my screen. An email notification popped up, blurry in the dark. I frowned, swiped upward to unlock, and my screen froze. No response. I tapped again. Nothing. I stared into the dim glow, willing it to respond, but the touchscreen stayed stubbornly black. A low wind moaned through the street, and I realized that checking my phone past the second chime was exactly the kind of thing that got you into trouble here. I tucked my phone back into my coat pocket and debated whether to leave the spot entirely. The rules felt less like helpful tips than a countdown to something bad. But the Ep28 was notoriously late, usually arriving anywhere between 12:05 and 12:15 a.m. I waited. Minutes passed. The street lamp sputtered, momentarily plunging me into deeper shadow before coming back to life with a loud clunk. My breath puffed in front of me, each exhale mingling with the distant hum of an idling engine I couldn't yet see. Then I heard the wheels, soft at first, then grinding louder against the asphalt curb. Relief should have washed over me, but when the bus pulled up, my relief turned to dread. The headlights were off. No yellow glow from the front display. It floated in silent darkness, a churning behemoth with no face. Its doors remained shut, and I could just make out my reflection in the windshield, eyes wide, hoodie pulled low over my forehead. A chill crept up my spine. I took a tentative step forward, forgetting the first rule for one heartbeat, then remembered, don't sit, only stand on the painted X. I inched back, replanting my feet exactly where the X marked. The door hissed open, and steam wafted out, smelling faintly of oil and wet earth. A figure in a black coat stepped down the aisle, one foot gently touching the pavement, then the other. They paused at the threshold, head bowed. I couldn't see their face, the brim of their hat shadowed their features, but the long coat swallowed their form like darkness made manifest. My heart thumped so hard I could feel it in my throat as I waited. The bus driver, if you could call them that, didn't announce the stop. The figure took one step forward, but instead of heading toward me, they stared back into the bus, as if expecting someone to follow. The sign's final rule slammed into my mind. If someone in a black coat steps off the bus, don't follow them. So I didn't. I stayed rooted to the X, watching the figure pause mid-stride, then turn away, melting into the night behind the bus. A trembling hand found the rail, and I climbed up because I still needed to get home, and this was the Ep28 after all. The interior lights flickered on with a tired buzz, revealing empty seats stretching back into gloom. I took one of the front benches, far from the driver's seat, next to a cracked window that rattled against the chill wind. I glanced down the aisle where the black-coated figure had been, but there was no one there. Only the soft thump-thump of the engine and the muted creak of metal. As the bus lurched forward, I realized I'd forgotten to check the route sign outside. No number, no destination, just an endless black corridor behind the windshield. My stomach twisted. Every stop sign and street lamp we passed bore names and numbers unfamiliar to me. I recognized none of it. Not the late-night diners I knew, not the highway off-ramps I took to work. Panic rose in my chest like bile. I tried my phone again, still dead. The dashboard clock glowed 12:13 a.m. in sickly red. Tourmaline reflections danced along the window's spiderweb cracks. The bus slowed to a crawl, then stopped under a set of blinking signals atop a pedestrian overpass. I expected the doors to open, to spill me back onto the pavement, but instead the driver turned around. Their face was pale, mouth slightly open as if mid-breath, eyes glassy and unmoving. I felt a wave of nausea. The rules, each one, flashed through me, a morbid checklist of what not to do. I dropped my gaze. I did not follow the black-coated figure. I had not checked my phone after the second chime. I had kept my eyes closed through the van's headlights. I was standing on the X, and yet here I was, trapped on a bus that was not taking me home. In the rearview mirror, the road behind us curved into a dark corridor framed by tangled branches. I sat frozen as the driver turned back around, slid the bus back into gear, and rolled forward into the void. I breathed shivered, waiting for the world to end. I don't know where the bus went after that, or how long I sat there before it ground to a halt again, somewhere far from any landmark I recognized. The doors swung open at 12:27 a.m., spilling cold mist onto my shoes. No sign, no lamppost, no painted X, the bench was gone. Beneath a pale crescent moon, I stepped down onto wet gravel and ran until my lungs burned. They found me hours later, wandering along a service road, barefoot and in shock. I still don't remember how I got there. I don't know who or what was wearing that black coat or where that driverless bus came from. All I know is I never saw the #42 again, and nobody believes a word of this. The sheriff's report calls it a hallucination, maybe sleep deprivation. My manager thinks I fell asleep on the bus and missed my stop. Even my friends laugh it off, egging me to take a night ride for closure. But I won't, because every time I hear a bus rumble past, I choke on the memory of those rules and of the black-coated figure stepping into the fog. And I know, deep in my bones, that if I ever break any one of those 4 rules again, if I ever sit or open my eyes too soon, or check a blinking phone, or follow someone into the darkness, I might not end up wandering home. I might never end up anywhere. I never believed the old laundromat rules, taped by the folding table, were anything more than a prank, one of those tacky jokes meant to spook late-night drunks or drunk drivers who wandered in at 2 a.m. But after last Thursday, I'm not so sure. I've read every true crime forum on the internet. I've sunk hours into glitch videos and obscure unsolved mysteries, and I still can't decide whether what happened was an elaborate hoax, a prank gone terribly wrong, or something else. I worked graveyard shift at Sparkle and Spin, a half-lit, nearly deserted laundrette off exit 14 of the interstate. It's one of those places that looks inviting in the daytime, bright neon, posters promising free Wi-Fi, images of fluffy towels tumbling in open drums. But by midnight, it's a mausoleum of humming machines and fluorescent lights, so harsh they cast every drop of dust floating in the air into sharp relief. The folding table sits in the center of the room under a single, flickering bulb, and that's the only place anyone ever leaves messages. It feels like a spotlight on a stage that's otherwise pitch dark. I'd been here a little over a month, stocking vending machines with detergent pods and keeping the change machine full. The handful of regulars, mostly stranded truck drivers and a couple of local owners, were always polite, but they never stayed more than 10 minutes. I'd never seen anything unusual. That is, until I found the sheet of rules one quiet morning. I got in around 1:40 a.m., flipped the open sign down, and headed straight to the folding table to grab a coffee from the vending machine. The note was taped right where I always put the spare quarters and lost socks. A yellowed half sheet of printer paper, the corners curled and stained. I'd seen it there for a few nights, slightly askew each time, but tonight it was hanging straight as a soldier. In bold, uneven handwriting, it read, "Laundromat rules after midnight. Never fold clothes on the red top table." If you hear static from the change machine after midnight, don't feed it coins. When the loud hum stops, stand perfectly still until it resumes. If anyone asks for your stain remover, give them half and walk away. No signature, no explanation, no date. I laughed when I read it, thinking somebody was trying to freak out the next unfortunate soul who shows up for a third shift wash. I shoved it under a stack of unused lint trap screens and walked over to the Rowenta machine for my double cream latte. A couple minutes later, while I was restocking the Tide Pods, a gust of cold air swept through the launderette, odd because the door was locked behind me and the windows were sealed shut. I glanced back at the folding table. The stack under which I'd stuffed the note was gone. Instead, the paper was taped right in front of me again, as if it had slid out from under the screens and slapped itself back up. Nothing else had moved. My skin crawled, but I told myself it was just a draft from the HVAC kicking in. Around 2 a.m., the place was empty except for me. I usually stayed until 3 to do my inventory, but I felt restless. The hum of 30 washers and dryers was oddly comforting at first, like a mechanical heartbeat. By the time I'd replaced the receipts in the printers and counted out the last rolls of quarters, I was craving something human, any human. I poured myself a cup of coffee and headed over to the folding table, only to remember Rule 1 at the last second. The table's top was bright red, laminate so glossy it looked like it might have been blood spattered in some B-movie. Against my better judgment, I laid my paper cup down and paused. My hand hovered over a clean pile of towels, and I swear I heard a whisper, "Don't." I snorted, shook my head, but the chill in my fingers didn't go away. I yanked the towels back off the table, slid them into a nearby plastic basket, and retreated to the counter. That's when the static started. It crackled and hissed through the change machine like someone trying to tune an off-frequency radio. The digital display flickered. Insert coin. Accept the slogan underneath. Exact change only. Blinked into something unreadable, like the LED segments were rearranging themselves. Rule 2 flashed into my mind. If you hear static from the change machine after midnight, don't feed it coins. I hadn't fed it anything. I'd been careful, only took quarters when someone needed them. But the static kept building, rising to a rasping crescendo. I turned toward the machine. My reflection in the glass looked back at me, pale and terrified. I backed away and swore under my breath. Of course, if I'd been alone here, I'd have called it a broken circuit. But with Rule 2 echoing in my ears, I didn't dare stick another dime in. I let it buzz itself out. Then I waited. At 2:14 a.m., the hum of the dryers cut out all at once. One moment, the low grinding noise blended into white noise behind the HVAC. The next, it stopped dead. Total silence. My blood ran cold. According to Rule 3, when the loud hum stops, stand perfectly still until it resumes. So, I stood. I rooted my feet to the linoleum tile and stared at the grouping of dryers like they were about to detonate. 2, maybe 3 minutes passed. My neck stiffened. My heart jammed cage rattling beats against my rib cage. My eyes watered, but the stillness had a hypnotic grip. I couldn't move even if I'd wanted to. Then, just as suddenly as it had ceased, the hum roared back to life. A massive exhale whooshed through the vents. I exhaled too, dropped my shoulders, and felt my knees buckle. Before I could sit, though, I noticed her. She was at the folding table beside me, just out of my peripheral vision. An old woman in a faded floral robe, slit-toed slippers, and a kerchief over her thin gray hair. She was hunched over, staring at the pile of soap town sheets I'd forgotten to restock. She didn't move. She didn't breathe, or at least I couldn't see her breathing. Rule 4 pinged in my mind. If anyone asks for your stain remover, give them half and walk away. I fumbled for that Tide pen like it was a grenade. My fingers trembled so badly I nearly dropped it. I stood up, swiped it from my pocket, and approached her. No sound from her, nothing but that rigid posture. "Ma'am, stain remover?" I croaked. She turned her head, and that's the last thing I remember seeing before the lights went out. All of them. Every bulb in the building. One instant I was squinting at her blank face. The next, I was stumbling through a tunnel of pitch. I crashed into the folding table, sent a paper-covered contraption clattering to the floor. Sparks flickered at the ends of my fingers, and I thumped my head so hard I saw stars. My phone's flashlight cut through the darkness in a thin cone. I panted, heartbeat thrumming so loud I thought the machines would hear it. When I looked up, the old woman was standing closer, too close. Her robe brushed the coffee table. I tilted the phone to illuminate her. Her face was nothing but pinpricks of yellow light where her eyes should have been. Her mouth, if it was a mouth, hung open in a gaping oval. No teeth, no tongue, just an endless void. I screamed. The lights flickered back on. She was gone. The Tide pen lay at my feet, half used, leaking that bright blue gel across the tile. I leapt over it, sprinted out the front door, slammed it behind me. I didn't stop running until I was halfway to the interstate. My phone rang, my manager, asking why I hadn't closed out the register. My furious voice must have made my bank of quarters in the change machine quake, because I thought I heard static through the speaker. I never went back to sparkle and spin. I hated to give up my paycheck, but after calling in sick for 3 days, my manager finally told me to find a new job. I'm working mornings now, stocking shelves at a grocery chain. Never thought I'd miss the hum of washers and dryers, but compared to that, well, let's just say I sleep better. I looked for that note online once, tried to find other people who'd seen it, speculating about the rules. Nothing. No urban legends, no Reddit threads, no TikToks. Just a lot of bored commenters making memes about supernatural laundry monsters. But I swear it happened just the way I'm telling it. I saw those rules. I felt the static. I heard that humming stop and start again. And I saw her, that thing in the robe with the hollow eyes and endless black mouth. So if you ever find yourself in a deserted laundromat after midnight and you see a list of rules taped by the folding table, remember, don't touch the red top table. Don't feed the change machine. Stand still when the hum stops. And under no circumstances, no matter how pitiful someone sounds, hand over your stain remover. Because whatever's out there, it's starving for something. And I'll be damned if I ever find out what it tastes like. If you ever find yourself driving alone at night, maybe after a night drinking with friends, getting off work late, or pushing yourself to reach a distant destination, refusing to stop for rest, and suddenly you're on a road that doesn't appear on your GPS or map, unsure how you even got there, you may have unknowingly been selected by 7 Turns Road. Take a deep breath and follow this guide exactly. I've traveled this road myself many times. There is no turning back, no stopping, only forward. First off, you need to understand something. You were chosen, and I have no idea why. There are no rituals, no secret incantations, or hidden routes to memorize. Believe me, I've looked for patterns. I've tried to outsmart it, and I've failed every time. The truth is simple and unsettling. You'll never find 7 Turns Road intentionally. It finds you. At first, it's subtle. After making just one turn, your original route blends seamlessly into an endless stretch that feels both familiar and surreal. It doesn't matter where you were originally heading. You'll know with absolute certainty you're truly on 7 Turns Road when the temperature abruptly plummets and roadside signs blur, warp, or become nonsensical, dreamlike symbols, distorted letters, upside-down markers. You'll feel it deep in your gut. Don't fixate on the signs. That's how it tricks you into losing control. You can slow down, even stop briefly. Hell, if panic sets in hard enough, you can step outside for a breath, but never, ever make it a habit. Those who get comfortable leaving their vehicle don't tend to survive. Read carefully, memorize these steps, and accept the reality you've entered. The only path out is straight ahead. Continue along the road. Wherever you started will feel somewhat familiar, yet increasingly distant. Eventually, this stretch will lead you to a second turn. Your car's radio will switch on automatically. Attempts to turn it off or adjust the volume will fail. At first, you'll hear a faint white noise that gradually evolves into a woman's soft muttering, indecipherable gibberish that slowly transforms into coherent words, spilling out your darkest secrets, hidden truths you've told no one. I was terrified the first few times, but keep your eyes glued to the road. Your headlights are your only illumination, and you cannot afford to crash. Ignore the woman and drive until the next turn appears. By the third turn, any lingering familiarity of your surroundings will vanish entirely. A dense, oppressive forest will surge upwards, its thick, tangled branches arching overhead to form an almost suffocating canopy, enclosing you completely. On either side of the road, animals will appear, standing impossibly still, a fox, a squirrel, a bear, a bird, all fixed like grotesque statues. Their empty, hollow eyes will lock onto your every movement, heads slowly pivoting in unnatural synchronization as your vehicle passes. Keep driving. Do not acknowledge them. They aren't animals, not anymore. They're mere husks, puppeteered by the road itself as silent watchers. If curiosity compels you to glance again, and trust me, you shouldn't, you'll notice those husks beginning to distort, melting as if made from wax beneath a relentless flame. First sloughs away in thick, wet clumps, revealing slick, gleaming surfaces beneath, like dark, chitinous exoskeletons. Eyes liquefy, dribbling slowly from their sockets in streams of viscous decay. The forest around you fills with the sickly sound of dripping, the quiet cracks and pops of joints shifting beneath unraveling skin. Eyes forward. Keep your foot steady on the gas. Pretend you don't see them, because I assure you, they see you. At the fourth turn, your fuel gauge will begin to plummet alarmingly fast. Your headlights will flicker intermittently. Remain calm. The road is enticing you to exit your vehicle. Do not. You're safe if you remain inside. Your speedometer will become erratic, but maintain a steady, comfortable speed. The radio's whispering will grow louder, clearer. The woman's voice will narrate every tiny detail of your existence, each blink, heartbeat, every breath you take, even the sweat dripping down your back onto your seat. Pay her no mind. Your focus must remain solely on the road until the next turn. On the fifth turn, a gentle snowfall begins, serene at first, softly coating your car. Normally, it might be calming, but the snow quickly intensifies. You'll notice your hearing fading alongside the thickening snowfall. The harsh wind buffeting your vehicle will abruptly stop. Your engine sounds will disappear, followed by your own panicked breathing. All you'll have left is a faint ringing in your ears. Visibility deteriorates until your headlights barely illuminate the blizzard. This snow goes on endlessly, miles upon miles. Do not look to the sides. Those silent, shadowy silhouettes will crawl toward your slowly moving car, attempting to pry their way inside or distract you into veering off the path. If you panic and leave the road, there's no returning. Some shadows will dash suddenly in front of your car. My advice? Pretend they're not there and keep driving. Eventually, you'll encounter a sign, ever-changing, surreal, similar to those at the first turn. Each glance away alters its appearance, but it signals your sixth turn. Right after passing this shifting sign, turn right immediately. Do not miss it. On the sixth turn, your hearing will gradually return. The relentless snowstorm, which seemed eternal, will abruptly cease, melting away rapidly and leaving you alone on the road. The road itself will deteriorate, becoming rough and worn before shifting into gravel. Your car will shake violently, rattling over every pebble and rock. Soon, these sounds will grow louder, heavier, disturbingly similar to the snapping and breaking of bones beneath your tires. An open field will suddenly stretch out around you, filled with hundreds, perhaps thousands of tall, dark figures. Initially, you might mistake them for dead, leafless trees, but they will begin to slowly, unsteadily move toward your vehicle. The smallest of these entities tower nearly 10 feet, while the largest stretch close to 20. Their elongated forms resemble charred bone fused with twisted bark. They possess smooth, featureless faces and deep, hollow mouths emitting anguished voices, cries, screams, and pleas of those you've loved, lost, or failed. You'll feel an overwhelming urge to stop and help them. Resist it. Accelerate as quickly as possible. The sound of cracking bones beneath your wheels, combined with their sorrowful cries, will make this turn one of the worst you've encountered. While slow, they will inch closer. Speed past them. As you approach the final turn, a profound sense of relief and accomplishment will flood through you. You'll feel as if you've narrowly escaped digestion by something monstrous and spat back out into safety. This turn will be deceptively beautiful, almost rewarding, adorned with climbing roses and vibrant flowers. Euphoria will briefly fill you until your headlights begin to flicker, your dashboard lights flash erratically, and every warning signal activates simultaneously. Your vehicle will abruptly die, coasting to a complete stop. With one final flicker of your headlights, utter darkness, deeper than any you've known, will consume you. This is the final test. The road will determine your fate. Remain inside, silent and still. You'll soon hear tapping and knocking against windows, doors, even beneath your car. Countless entities will circle and inspect your vehicle, breathing heavily and scratching at the exterior. Hold tightly to your steering wheel. Do not brake or attempt to restart your car. Your car will begin shifting as they're pushing it towards something immense. You'll hear shuffling footsteps rapidly retreat, fearful. Then, something massive will open wide. Though invisible in the darkness, you'll sense its enormity. Your car will shift downward, your stomach plummeting as adrenaline floods your veins. A sudden drop will follow. Your vehicle will slowly descend into something terrible, crushing and grinding around you. You'll hear the car being chewed apart, the metal shredding. Sharp edges will puncture through the floor, roof, and sides. Something will scrape your flesh. The vehicle will compress tighter, the roof pressing inches from your face, the sound of destruction deafening. Then, with a final, sickening spin, you'll plummet, spiraling until consciousness fades. You'll awaken gasping on a quiet roadside, the exact place 7 Turns Road first claimed you. Feel the grass, the dirt beneath your fingers. Breathe deeply. You've survived, for now. But surviving once doesn't mean freedom forever. I've traveled this road more times than sanity should allow, and each escape comes at a heavier price. Keep this guide safe, because the road won't forget you. Even as I finish typing this from the supposed safety of my driveway, I look up, and where my house should be stands an endless road stretching onward, signs distorted and beckoning. 7 Turns Road calls me again. After the storm, I found him, a drenched stranger drifting in my pool. In that moment, I wished I'd never welcomed him inside my home. Even as a child, I was captivated by the strange gifts the sea brought ashore. Every summer at my Grammy's weathered beach house, a relic perched on the edge of the shore, I would wander barefoot around the water's edge. In Florida, the storms never ended. Each tempest brought a peculiar mix of debris and creatures that transformed our pool into a miniature ocean. I remember the thrill of discovering life among the broken branches and seaweed. Once, as I knelt at the water's edge with my dollar store net, a sudden ripple made me jump back. I expected a sea creature to emerge from the murk. Instead, It was only an old plank of wood. But then the water burst upward, drenching me, and for one fleeting moment, I believed I'd caught fish. That was when laughter echoed. Roman, the odd kid from next door with eyes too large and a perpetual smirk, had been watching. He was notorious for researching in Grammy's pool, though his true intentions were as murky as the water itself. Roman always prodded, always intruding. "What you looking for?" he'd say, his tone half mocking, half curious. I'd reply curtly, "Fish," and he'd tease that he too was on the hunt. I tried to shoo him away, but he never took no for an answer. His constant presence along the broken fence made it clear he'd heard more than I intended. Before I could shout for help, he slipped back into the water, another unwelcome shadow in my solitary quest. My searches yielded marvels: vibrant starfish, stray jellyfish from the tide, even a baby shark my mom had to rescue with a net. Yet nothing filled the void, the elusive secret both my Grammy and Roman whispered about: fish people. Grammy wasn't always the sharp, quirky storyteller I remembered. Diagnosed with a vicious form of Alzheimer's early on, she spent her later years locked in the haze of forgetfulness. But when her mind cleared, she spun tales of fantastical encounters beneath the waves. I clung to those stories like lifelines, desperate to preserve the memory of the woman I loved even as she slipped away. I recall my 10th birthday clearly. The power failed amid my favorite TV show, and while Grammy slept on the couch, I remembered Mom's storm preparedness. I gathered my flashlight, water bottles, snacks, and her medications, then helped her down to the basement. Usually quiet and distant by then, Grammy suddenly looked at me with a smile, a spark of her old self, and asked, "Can I tell you about the fish people, Charlotte?" I knew then that her stories were more than mere fables. They were echoes of a promise she once made. She told me of a beautiful boy from the sea, Sebastian, who had swept her away with dreams of a secret underwater kingdom. He asked me to be his queen. She'd laughed, recalling that day with a bittersweet glow. We were to run away together, to a world beneath the waves. But as her tale turned darker, her voice wavered. She admitted that day after day, she waited on the shore, even as time and memory betrayed her. "I waited until sunrise became sunset," she whispered, a confession of endless longing. Years later, as middle school dragged on, Roman's antics made me a laughingstock, nicknames and jeers that stung more than the ocean's salt. I clung to the fantasy of finding Sebastian, hoping that if I could rescue him for Grammy, maybe I could mend some of the shattered memories. I even began sending letters into the surf, believing that the sea might one day return her lost love. Then came the day when the past collided violently with the present. I received a terse text from Roman: "I'm not cleaning the pool." Apparently, as per an odd twist in Grammy's will, he was now a co-owner of the house, chosen because he resembled the mythical Sebastian. My parents were furious, but I had long since accepted that some ghosts of the past never truly fade away. That night, as a mild storm raged, I took refuge in the basement of the old house. Memories of Grammy's ceramic fish ornaments and the shells she claimed were gifts from Sebastian haunted me. Lost in thought, I nearly forgot the open gate until a sudden, frantic text shattered the silence. "Shut the gate." Idiot! I dashed outside into the howling wind, and that's when I saw it, a strange, ethereal movement beneath the dark surface of my pool. I dropped to my knees and grabbed my old net, eyes straining to follow a mysterious greenish glow beneath the water. Memories of childhood excitement mingled with dread as I waded into the pool. The water rippled, and then I saw him, a young man, early 20s, with a body half merged into something unearthly. His thick, tangled hair clung to his damp skin, interwoven with bits of driftwood and sea glass. When he emerged, his eyes met mine, a painful, silent plea amid blood streaks across the tiles. He bore an injury, a deep gash in what I now recognized as a fin that glimmered with the same shade as my own blood. I signaled him to wait and clumsily scrambled for my flashlight. Amid a wild gust of wind that nearly knocked me under, he pulled me to the surface. With trembling hands, I managed to drag him to Grammy's old bathtub, determined to tend to his wounds. As I bathed him, I recalled Grammy's whispered lore. Children of the sea must be soaked through, or they'll suffocate on land. I treated his bleeding scales with the care of someone trying to save a long-forgotten myth. But even as I asked if his name was Sebastian, he shook his head, clearly offended at my assumption. His silence, punctuated only by glances at my scattered shampoo bottles, deepened the mystery. For hours, we lay there, me recounting stories of Grammy's merman and him listening in silence. I marveled at how his skin shifted in the dim light, the transformation of flesh into scales reminiscent of a slow, creeping virus. His tail, too, was a marvel, a strange hybrid of fin and fused legs. At one point, just as I was losing myself in the fragile hope that he might be the same Sebastian of Grammy's memories, a violent pain gripped me. My lungs constricted, and I found myself gasping for air until the water itself became a savior. I managed to pull myself back to the pool's edge, where Roman reappeared, his eyes wide with alarm as he took in the surreal scene. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. Between choked breaths, I explained the impossible. Grammy's fish people were real. His disbelief turned to horror as he watched the merman. No, not a merman at all, but something far darker, gradually transform before our eyes. When I discovered that the creature's secret wasn't magic at all, but a parasitic infection twisting human bodies into water-bound abominations, my stomach churned. Roman's transformation began subtly, a trace of green on his cheek, then skin hardening into scales. Desperation replaced our initial fascination as the merman calmly explained that without the sea's embrace, Roman's body would wither beyond repair. In a moment of panic and grim determination, I retrieved a knife. Though every instinct screamed against it, I made a cut, following the creature's cold instructions to allow Roman's body to adapt. The act felt monstrous, and when I saw tiny, worm-like creatures writhing from his wound, I realized we were dealing with something that defied every natural law. As Roman's anguished pleas filled the air, I carried him to the shallow end and watched, numb, as the merman began the final transformation. Roman's body fused, his limbs merging into a tail, his eyes turning vacant. I wanted to scream, to beg for mercy from this relentless horror, but my voice was lost in the chaos. In the days that followed, the house was never the same. Roman's disappearance was chalked up to a drowning, and while my parents planned to rent out the house for summer parties, I couldn't bear the thought of another soul stepping near the cursed pool. I spent every weekend scrubbing away the memory of bloodstains and broken dreams, yet the pool remained a magnet for the curious and the damned. Only recently, as spring break arrived, I returned to inspect the property. The cement patio was wet with rain and something else. Leaning casually against the pool's edge was a figure whose tail glistened in a sickly green-blue hue. My heart sank as I realized that the nightmare wasn't over. The grotesque parasite that had twisted Roman was still out there, lurking in the shallow water, drawing unsuspecting souls toward its malevolent tide. I stared at the creature as Roman's mocking laughter echoed from beneath the surface, a sound that blended human misery with the call of the deep. I scrambled for my phone to call my parents, but the sound of children's excited footsteps grew louder. One by one, they rushed toward the pool like moths to a flame. Their laughter and splashes soon turned to desperate screams as they vanished beneath the surface. Locked in my room, the world outside was unnaturally silent. I couldn't escape the merman's final words that still rang in my ears. 15 minutes. That's how long it takes for a human to lose their legs. I realized then that the curse was spreading, and with every new victim, the line between myth and reality blurred a little more. I sit here now, trembling in the silence, haunted by the realization that some legends never die, they only change form. I thought refilling the snack volatile at 3 and couldn't get more mundane until I saw Rule 7. The first night on the graveyard shift at Miller's Gas and Go felt like any other late-night job. Stale fluorescent lights humming overhead, the faint aroma of burnt coffee drifting from the single ancient brewer behind the counter, and shelves stocked neatly with chips, candy bars, and overpriced sodas. My boss, a wiry man named Carl, showed up 15 minutes before closing, shoved a laminated sheet under my nose, and muttered, "Just follow the rules. They keep everything manageable." I glanced at the list as he backed out of the door. Never looked directly at the old woman on pump 6. Refill only half the tooth whitener display. Sweep the parking lot every hour on the hour, no exceptions. If the power flickers, crouch behind the counter until it stabilizes. Never answer the third ring on the red phone. Keep the back door chained, even when you hear scratching. Don't open the storage room door after midnight. Carl's eyes flicked over Rule 7, and he half smiled before leaving me alone. The parking lot was deserted save for a battered pickup at pump 6 that glistened under the neon glow. The attendant's pager in my pocket buzzed if someone rang the doorbell. Otherwise, I'd while away the hours refilling shelves and restocking the register. I was tired, but I'd managed worse shifts in college, so I shrugged and taped the sheet above the register where I could see it. At 11 p.m., I noticed the tooth whitener display. 3 shelves of neon tubes promising ice blue grins. I refilled only the top 3, following Rule 2, but as I stepped back, my eyes lingered on the bottom shelf. Something about the tubes there looked different. Too white, almost luminescent. I blinked and refocused. No, I'd done right. I snapped the cap back in place. It felt wrong, somehow, to stare. Midnight came with a singular chime that echoed through the store, Carl's old grandfather clock behind the counter, ticking out the hour in a hollow thud. My watch said 12 o'clock exactly. The lights flickered once, twice. My heart hammered. I crouched behind the counter as per Rule 4, breath loud in the cramped space. The hum of electricity faltered and returned, the silence pressing against me. I straightened, relieved, and peered at the cameras behind the monitor. Everything looked normal. The parking lot was still empty. That's when I first heard it, a soft scuffling from the back, beyond the chain door labeled "Storage, Employees Only." I remembered Rule 6, chain it even when you hear scratching. I knelt and, in the dim keep-it glow, clicked the clasp shut. But the noise persisted, a dragging, like something heavy being pulled across concrete. I pressed my ear to the door. Something rasped and scratched, then quieted. I imagined a rat, trapped, desperate. My rational mind argued. I grabbed the broom and crept toward the back hallway, heart pounding so loudly it threatened to betray me. Halfway there, another flicker. The light stuttered. I stumbled, slapping the broom against a shelf. The power returned, and in that instant, I saw her, an old woman in tattered gray, standing just beyond pump 6. Her face was hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, shadows cloaking her features. She held a wrinkled hand outstretched, as though waiting for change, a penny, a cigarette, a life. Goosebumps chased my spine. Rule 1. Never look directly at the old woman on pump 6. But my gaze was locked to hers. A single bead of something, sweat, blood, trickled down her cheek. She tilted her head and smiled. I tore my eyes away and sprinted back to the counter, nearly tripping over my own feet. The pager vibrated with a ring. My instinct screamed, "Don't answer the third ring." But I reached out, thumb hovering. 2 rings, 3, my finger trembled. I ripped the handset off the cradle. A crackle, then silence. My breath itched. I tugged the phone back. It slammed down, unanswered. A blast of static slammed through the receiver on its own, then a rasping whisper. Do you see her? I yanked the handset free and tossed it onto the register. It skittered across the counter. The old woman was gone. Rule 3 said sweep the parking lot every hour on the hour. It was now 12:15. I grabbed the broom and dustpan, locked the store door behind me, and stepped into the night chill. The lot was empty until I reached pump 6. Footprints in damp asphalt led away toward the back door. I crouched to inspect them. 3-toed impressions, like bird tracks, but too deep, too heavy. My breath crystallized in the air. I swept the lot mechanically, my eyes darting to the footprints, then to the darkened fields beyond the highway. Back inside, I refilled the ice machine tray and ran water over it, but the ice was pink. I dropped the tray, ice cubes scattering like shattered teeth across the floor. I grabbed the laminated rules and read them again, hoping to find some instruction about unexpected stains or odd occurrences. Nothing. Just the 7 rules. I felt trapped, as if the store itself breathed around me, its fluorescent veins pulsing in the walls. At 1 a.m., the power flickered once more. I ducked behind the counter as my instinct screamed Rule 4. The humming ceased, replaced by a low thrum, like chains dragged across metal. My chest tightened. I inched forward, peering over the counter. The front door lock rattled, though no one rang the bell. The neon open sign above the door buzzed, letters twisting until it spelled Pinio, then sputtered back to normal. I froze, mind racing. Was I hallucinating? Exhaustion? I rubbed my temples and stood, determined to prove nothing was here to hurt me. Then I heard footsteps overhead, slow and deliberate. Above the drop ceiling panels where the wiring lived. I stared up. The footsteps marched from one end to the other, disappearing by the storage room. Another flicker, then the light steadied. I ran to the door, trembled in my hand, but remembered Rule 7, don't open the storage room door after midnight. My rational mind begged me to peek, to see what was making those sounds, but I couldn't risk it. I backed away, pressing myself flat against the opposite wall. Minutes crawled by. My breath came in shallow gasps. I counted heartbeats, the only rhythm in the stillness. Finally, the footsteps retreated. The store felt hollow, like I'd disturbed something ancient. I forced myself to walk to the coffee station and poured a cup, burnt grounds I'd left at 2 sharp, per Rule 5. I inhaled its bitter aroma and tried to steady my nerves. I calculated the hours until dawn, just 4 more to go. At 2:37, the doorbell chimed unexpectedly. A single chime, distinct from the multi-ring the pager emitted. My blood ran cold. I approached the door cautiously, heart thundering. A woman's silhouette pressed against the glass, but when I flicked on the porch light, no one stood there. Only a pool of darkness and a single white glove lying in the gravel. I picked it up. It was damp, slimy in my hand. My fingertips brushed the fingertips of the glove. No bones, no leather, just something rubbery that pulsed faintly. I dropped it, and it landed latched open, revealing a single jagged nail file etched with the number 7. Rule 7. Don't open the storage room door after midnight. My stomach twisted. Something or someone was reminding me why. I slipped into the back hallway, flashlight in trembling hand, determined to confront whatever lurked within. My pulse hammered, each breath a rasp in the narrow corridor. I reached the chain door. The chain lay rusted but intact. Yet the door itself sagged slightly, as though something on the other side had been pushing from within. I gripped the cold knob. For a moment, adrenaline blurred my senses. I could turn the knob, unchain the door, expose the secret that plagued my nights. Instead, I slid my phone from my pocket and dialed Carl's number. No answer. I tried again. Nothing. The hallway lights flickered. My vision tunneled. I realized I was alone, truly alone, with these rules and whatever had whispered them into existence. At 3 a.m., the signage above flickered off, plunging the store into near darkness, save for the pale glow of the slush machine. I stood motionless as the heartbeat of the building slowed. Then, from the other side of the storage door, a single soft click. The door unlatched itself. Slowly, the knob turned. Page by page, I recalled each rule. Don't look, only half refill, sweep, crouch, don't answer, keep chained, don't open. I closed my eyes, braced for the terror that awaited. The door swung inward. The heat hit me first, an oppressive, fetid warmth that smelled of rot and old paper. My flashlight beam trembled across the room. Crates stacked haphazardly, boxes leaking dark stains, and at the far corner, a low slung shape quivering. It turned its head. Too many eyes glittered back at me, all ringed with madness. Faces pressed to the glass of human skulls. Feral hands scratched the air. Behind them, a flicker of movement. The old woman, her hat soaked in shadow, her smile stretched wide. She raised her hand, beckoning. I stumbled back, slamming the door. Chains rattled as I yanked them across the latch. The power returned in a snap, lights humming to life. The storage door trembled, rattling behind the chain. I dropped to my knees, chest heaving, mouth dry. Rule 7 had been written to keep that darkness in, to keep it chained, unseen, and I had almost unleashed it. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. I didn't refill anything. I didn't answer the pager. I sat behind the counter, knees drawn to my chest, staring at the laminated sheet. Dawn's light crept through the windows as the highway outside stirred. Carl's car rolled in at 6 a.m. sharp. He unlocked the door, yawned, and switched the open sign off. I stood, hands shaking, and slid the sheet across the counter. I can't, I whispered. I can't do it anymore. He nodded as if he'd expected this. Good, he said quietly. You followed the rules. He took the sheet, folded it, and tucked it into his pocket. Nobody else has, he added, and they're not coming back. He paused, eyes darkening. But you did. You did what you were supposed to. Then he turned and walked out, leaving me alone in the rattling hum of the gas station, wondering what would happen if the next person didn't. I never believed something could live behind these walls until I heard it call my name in the dark. Every night, after the world outside had slipped beneath its shallow moonlit sleep, I lay awake in my bedroom, straining to will my eyelids to close. It began as a soft scuttling, like insects feeding on rot. I told myself it was mice, always mice. I pictured them darting through voids between plaster and lath, their tiny teeth gnawing at the building's aging bones. But no matter how many traps I set, no bodies ever turned up. No chewed bodies, no lifeless forms to confirm my suspicions. Only silence until the scratching resumed. The first time I woke to a whisper, I froze mid-breath, convinced I'd slipped across the border into another realm. A faint voice, so soft I almost doubted my own ears, murmured, "Can you hear me?" It was impossible to tell where it came from, left wall, right wall, ceiling, closet. The darkness swallowed direction. My heart thundered so loudly I thought the entire house must tremble. When I dared to speak, my own voice sounded alien. "Who's there?" I croaked. No answer. Just the scratch, 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 like claws dragging across wood. Night after night, the sounds grew bolder. The first few nights, I blamed fatigue. The next week, I moved my reading lamp closer, thinking the beam would banish phantom noises. Instead, each glow of light seemed to embolden them. Scratches became taps, taps became thumps, thumps became heavy breathing, low rasping that echoed inside my skull. I started wearing earplugs, piled pillows over my head, pressed my palms so hard to my ears I thought I'd crush myself. Still, I heard it, a wet, deliberate rasp that slithered inside my mind. Driven half mad by exhaustion, I bought a drill. Even in my haze, I reasoned, if I bored holes through the plaster, I'd either glimpse a nest of rodents or prove to myself there was nothing supernatural here. Late one night, I shoved the drill's bit against the wallpapered wall beside my bed and pressed the trigger. The drill groaned to life, spinning as I pushed forward. Suddenly, a stifled gasp echoed through the bit, rattling the tool in my hands. It sounded absurd, like breathing into a straw. I jerked back, yanked the drill free, and the wall fell silent except for my own ragged breathing. By morning, I found my hands shaking. I couldn't tell whether I'd hurt an animal or a monster. Colleagues at the office noticed dark circles under my eyes. I smiled wanly and blamed insomnia. But I started to dread dusk the way one dreads a train wreck about to happen. After dinner, I lay in bed, feigning sleep even as I awaited the first sign. And always, within an hour of the streetlights flickering on, I heard it begin. I tried reasoning with it, speaking softly into the plaster. "What do you want?" I whispered through the wall. I imagined my voice pushing through plaster, wood, and lath, reaching a small hidden chamber. For weeks, there was no reply. Then, one night, a single word floated back, home, home. My skin prickled. The house I'd moved into less than a year ago was hardly home. I rented, after all, an old Victorian remodeled into apartments. I'd never met the other tenants, and the landlord lived 3 states away. Yet that night, I sat bolt upright, heart hammering, as if I'd awoken in my childhood bedroom. "I'm not your home," I whispered fiercely. "This is just an apartment." "Silence!" I cursed myself for speaking aloud. The neighbors would question me. I needed proof. I decided, in some perverse sense, to catch it. I set up a digital voice recorder on a nightstand pointed at the wall. I wrapped it in a scarf to muffle any click of buttons. When the scratching began, I hit record. The next morning, I crept in to retrieve the device, certain I'd captured something. Instead, the recorder was gone. No sign of it on the floor, no battery compartment opened or batteries missing, just gone. I searched the room in a panic, convinced it had dragged the recorder into the wall. After an hour, I found it tucked behind a book in my old leather armchair, screen cracked and smeared with something dark I refused to examine. Sleep was impossible after that. I began keeping a notebook on my bedside table. Every sound, every whisper, every thump I jotted down with trembling hands, along with timestamps. Yet tomorrow morning, whenever I glanced at the page, the times were smudged, the ink blurred, as though wet, and the writing illegible. I accused myself of dreaming it, ink bleeding in my sleep. I vowed to switch to pencil, but pencils shattered, snapped in two, or vanished entirely. On the 7th night, I sat cross-legged on the floor, flashlight in one hand, my father's old hunting knife in the other. I ripped at a corner of wallpaper, tearing carefully so I could replace it later, revealing a patch of bare plaster. I waited, willing the darkness to breathe. And then I heard it. A scratching, soft at first, then jolting, frantic. I pressed my ear to the plaster, the flashlight's trembling beam illuminating dust motes. The breath that exhaled against my ear was cold, oily, as if something had crawled out of my nightmares. "Help me," it rasped. I slammed my hand over my mouth, yanked back the knife. My grip tightened until the handle bit into my palm. I glanced around the room, the door, the closet, the ceiling fan, anywhere something could have moved. But I was alone. The knife fell, clattering to the floor, and the voice ended with a single, pained sob. I should have run then, anything to escape those walls. But something held me there. Pity, curiosity, madness, perhaps all three. I tried to piece together a narrative. Whoever, or whatever, lived here had been trapped, maybe for decades, perhaps since the house was built. The wallpaper's pattern was old, curling at the edges. It hinted at layers beneath layers, painted over countless times. I thought of the house history, rumors of a child who disappeared in the 1920s, of secret passages and hidden rooms left behind by drunken servants. It seemed too perfect. I started tearing at more wallpaper, section by section, until I uncovered a faint outline of a door drawn in cramped scratches. It was small, barely a foot tall, etched into the plaster. Beneath it, someone had scratched a date, 10th October 2030. Over it, one name, Evelyn. My chest tightened. I remembered reading about a young girl named Evelyn who vanished in 1930, her parents blaming her flighty imagination when she spoke of another family living inside the walls. They claimed she wandered away, never to return. Her case went cold. The house eventually sold, repainted, renovated, but the house stayed. She never came home. My breath caught. I ran to my laptop and searched Evelyn Wall's 1930 disappearance. The first result was a forum post from a local history enthusiast. He wrote that the house had a hidden dollhouse replica built for Evelyn by her father, down to the smallest detail. When Evelyn stopped speaking, he died of heartbreak. No one ever found the dollhouse. Some believed Evelyn, an only child, wandered into a secret passage and was never rescued. The house stood abandoned for years after. I stared at the photo in the post, a peeling wallpaper that matched mine exactly. I sank to the floor, mind racing. It couldn't be coincidence. The scratching continued outside my apartment too, in the bedrooms of other tenants, always dismissed as plumbing or settling pipes. None of them reported whispers or voices though. Why had it chosen me? I felt a pang of guilt. How many nights had Evelyn waited for someone to find her door? For someone to let her out? My insomnia transformed into dread. I barely ate. I haunted the edges of wakefulness, eyes fixed on the walls. When morning came, I washed out my mouth and told my reflection to hold up until tomorrow. My reflection didn't answer. On the 10th night, there was thunder and rain battered the windows. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the storm. For the first time, the voices beneath the plaster paused, as though the presence behind them was watching, waiting. Then came a hard knock, 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 swift and regular, as if someone rapping from the other side. It grew faster, tap, 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 until it turned into a furious pound. My entire body twitched with each impact. I sat up. The lamp flickered. I grabbed my father's knife and approached the wall where Evelyn's door had once been sketched. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the knife. I pressed my palm against the damp plaster. The pounding ceased. In the silence, I thought I heard a sob that shook the floorboards. "Evelyn?" I whispered. "I'm here." The wall temperature shifted. Where my hand pressed, the plaster felt soft like damp clay. My fingers sank into it. I gasped and withdrew it. Smears of pale plasticine clung to my skin. I looked closer. The plaster was breathing, pulsing, as if alive. The ridges of Evelyn's door reappeared, freshly carved, deeper than before, and below it was not one date, but two. 10th October 2030, and tonight's date, tonight, the 10th anniversary of my moving in. In 5 years, on this same date, she would open the door herself. My heart hammered. I stumbled backwards, slashed at the air with the knife, as if threatening a phantom. The plaster smoothed out behind my back, erasing the door. But I heard it, a gentle click, like a lock unlatching. And then, just beyond the wall, something moved. I could almost see the hinge turning. My breath left me in a ragged gasp. I bolted for the window, flung it open, and lunged onto the fire escape. Rain sluiced down my hair. I stared back at the apartment window, revulsion knotting my stomach. Whatever was behind those walls Whatever was Evelyn would be waiting for me when I returned. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed on the fire escape until dawn, cold and soaked. I could still hear the soft scratching from within my own skull, an echo of the voice that called my name. When the building manager finally found me at sunrise, I barely heard his questions. I handed him my keys and left without looking back. 2 days have passed since I moved into a new place. It's smaller, newer construction, drywall, metal studs, no lath or plaster, or so I thought. I taped the seams and painted over every wall by daylight. No more peeling wallpaper, no more hidden doors. The echoes of Evelyn's voice still haunt me in the quiet hours before sleep. I'm terrified that tonight, when the clock strikes midnight, I'll hear that same click from behind a wall that should be solid. I'm terrified she'll come back and find there's no place for her anymore. But sometimes in the silence, I swear I feel nails scratching at the back of my head, as though Evelyn is right behind me, desperate to be seen, desperate to go home. And I have nowhere left to run. I never imagined an alarm could be more terrifying than the silence it shattered. When I first moved into the little brick bungalow at the edge of town, I was charmed by its quaint porch swing and neatly trimmed hedges. Inside, the walls were a pale cream, warm under the sunlit afternoons. I unpacked my life in boxes and hung family photos on the plaster, breathing relief that I'd finally escaped the cramped apartment that had nearly driven me mad. I downloaded a sleep tracker app, setting my phone alarm for 6:30 a.m. each morning. Then I went to bed, confident that at worst I'd wake groggy, hit snooze once or twice, and stumble into the workday. On the third night, something woke me at exactly midnight. My phone vibrated against the nightstand, buzzing like a swarm of flies. I flung an arm out to slap it silent, but when I saw the screen light up with the alarm icon, I froze. The app displayed no scheduled alarm at that hour. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and the screen dimmed to black. Silence reclaimed the room. I sat up, heart hammering, scanning the dark corners. I told myself it was a glitch, a stray notification. I sighed, fell back against the pillow, then I heard it. From beneath the bed came a tiny voice, so soft I thought I'd imagined it. "Your time starts now." My skin went cold. I flipped on the bedside lamp, the low glow revealing nothing but my unworn slippers and the dusty crate I'd unpacked earlier and shoved under the frame. The voice dripped from the darkness like syrup. I knelt beside the bed, peered under it, but only the crate, its rough wood grain etched with fading letters I couldn't read in the lamplight. I set the lamp on the floor and reached for the crate handle. My fingers touched cold metal hinges. Whatever was speaking was trapped inside. The next night, I half expected nothing. I lay in bed, half-heartedly setting my phone alarm for midnight just in case. At exactly 12 hours 0 minutes 0 seconds, the app vibrated again, but this time the screen showed no alarm dialed within the next 24 hours. My breath caught. The old-fashioned alarm clock taped to the bottom of the crate ticked up beside me. Its two black hands quivered, then snapped upright at 12. Its bells chimed once, but the sound was hollow, echoing from the crate as though the clock itself were inside. Then the ticking began in my skull, pulsing in time with the clock's backward spin. I ripped the clock free from the crate. Its face was smeared with dust, and the back panel rattled with something loose inside. The hands spun backward, the numbers contorting. I shook it. The ticking slowed, then halted as if frozen. For a moment I heard nothing but my panicked breathing. Then, from the crate, the latch clicked. My entire body froze. I stared at the crate's lid, expecting it to burst open, but it remained shut. The clock's hands jerked back to 12, and the bells chimed twice. "Your time starts now," the voice whispered again, this time so close I felt warm breath on my ankle. I ran to the living room and threw the crate onto the couch. I pressed my ear to the wood. A rasping breath hissed against my skin, and the crate vibrated as if struggling from the inside. My heart felt lodged in my throat. I jabbed at the crate with a screwdriver, pried at the seams, but the wood held fast. Whatever was inside was strong. I backed away until I hit the hall wall, sliding down until I sat on the floor, trembling. I listened as the clock's chime faded into the darkness, and the house fell silent once more. Daylight offered no relief. I stuck a post-it to the crate reading, "Do not open," and taped it shut with duct tape. I considered calling a locksmith, a handyman, anyone to remove the hinges and free whatever was trapped. But I dreaded seeing what might crawl out. I worried that if I freed it, I would be releasing something that sized me up as prey. At work, my coworkers noticed my jittery glances at windows and the way I flinched at sudden noises. I lied that I was having electrical problems. They nodded sympathetically, but never offered help. That evening, I bought a digital voice recorder and left it on the coffee table facing the crate. I set my phone alarm for midnight again. I taped the recorder's playback button, muffling its clicks, and curled up on the couch with the blanket covering my head. At midnight, my phone buzzed. The recorder's little red light blinked on its own before the crate shook violently. The recorder tumbled off the table. Papers scattered. I winced at the sound of heavy breathing resonating through the room. The recorder light blinked brighter, then dimmed. When I dared to look, it was silent and still. I pressed stop, unwrapped the tape, and played it back. Static! A high-pitched whine that made my ears ache. Then a whisper, "You can't hide." It crackled and warped, then went silent. My blood ran cold. Night after night, the pattern repeated. My phone alarm buzzed at midnight. I jolt awake, the crate rattles, the clock chimes, the voice beckons. I stopped sleeping. My eyes burned, head pounding, but I dared not close them. I emptied the medicine chest of sleeping pills, popped one, hoping to dull my senses. I dreamt of tinny bell chimes and saw faces pressed to the crate slats, pale lips, dead eyes begging to be let out. I woke each time at 11:58 p.m., heart racing, tongue cottony. On the seventh night, I decided to face it. I lined the hallway with lamps so there were no shadows. At precisely 11:50, I crouched before the crate with a crowbar, my phone in one hand, the recorder in the other. The clock under the crate ticked backward in ominous beats. I pried at the lid. The wood cracked. My knuckles whitened. I heard something shift inside. At 11 hours 59 minutes 30 seconds, I yanked the lid free and the crate exploded open. A figure lunged out, colliding with my chest so hard I flew backward. I hit the wall, wind knocked out of me. A woman lay panting on the floor. Her hair was soaked, dripping water onto the rug in little puddles that hissed like steam. Her nightgown clung to her pale skin. Her eyes were wide and panicked. She stared at me, mouth working, but no sound came. Behind her, the crate quivered on the couch, its back panel loose. The old clock perched on top spun furiously, hands at odds. I scrambled to my feet, backing away as the clock's bells rang out in rapid staccato, each chime a stab in my chest. The woman pressed a wet hand to the floorboards, pulling herself upright. She looked at me, fear giving way to pleading. I realized the voice wasn't coming from the crate now. It was coming from her own mouth. "My time is up," she croaked. Her voice was an echo, metallic and distant. She staggered toward the front door. "I need." She clutched her chest as if her heart had seized. She looked back at me, tears in her eyes, then turned the knob and slipped out into the night. I slammed the door shut, fumbling for the deadbolt. The last thing I heard was her whispered "thank you," followed by the click of her footsteps fading away on the porch. I collapsed in the entryway, shaking. The crate lay empty behind the sofa, the clock silent at 12. I thought it over with trembling logic. How had she gotten in? How had she been trapped in wood beneath my bed? I checked the crate. No secret compartments. Nothing but rough planks and nails. The recorder lay at my feet. I pressed play. A hollow voice, then her raspy whisper, "Your time starts now." Terror gripped me anew. If her time had ended at midnight, then mine began. I raced to the window, but the street was empty, bathed in yellow lamplight. I tried to call the police, but my phone wouldn't dial out. It buzzed and clicked, then showed no service. I pounded the handset against my palm until the screen cracked, then threw it aside. Sleep was impossible. I moved the crate to the dining room and taped black plastic backs over every window and door. I set chairs and tables in front of them, creating a barricade. I double-checked the locks on the front and back. Then I waited. At 11:45 p.m., I sat in the dark dining room, knees drawn to my chest. I could hear the muffled tick-tock of the clock somewhere, though I knew it had ceased. The house seemed to hold its breath. At 11:58, I felt a breeze brush my cheek, even though every opening was covered. It carried the faintest scent of rain and something metallic, like blood. My ear pressed to the wall. I heard whispers in languages I didn't know, layered and overlapping, rising into a chant. The clock resumed, deep within the walls. Ding, ding, ding. My blood froze. My foot tapped in time. Then the chant crescendoed, followed by a terrible silence. At exactly midnight, a single chime rang out from the wall behind me, so clear I felt it in my spine. Then the door I'd locked from the inside began to rattle shake as though pounded from the other side. The plastic tore. Chairs toppled. The hinges creaked. I bolted from the barricade toward the back door, but the front began to open. Wide-eyed, I ran into the hall where the crate had been, now empty and lifeless. The woman. No, the thing that had worn her skin. Her body lay collapsed on the floorboards in glistening beads of what looked like water and oil. It seemed to dissolve, a pale shape spreading into the wood. The spot where she'd fallen rippled like a disturbed pond. Each chime echoed through my skull, one after another, faster and faster. I heard her voice in my ear, whispered so close I felt warm breath against my neck. Your time. The front door swung open, and a figure stepped through the threshold. My limbs froze. In the dim lamp glow, I recognized the woman, but her face was too long, her limbs too angular. Water dripped from her hair, pooling at her feet. Her eyes were black windows, empty. She smiled, a slow, wet curl of lips. Then she tilted her head and spoke in that rasping whisper. It's time. I screamed, lunged for the back door, and yanked it open. Rain poured in. Lightning flashed across the sky. I didn't stop to notice the thunder or the downpour. I ran onto the lawn, barefoot, dripping, heart pounding like the final toll of a bell. Behind me, the house windows lit up with that backward ticking, hundreds of tiny clocks turning fast, chimes ringing in unison. I didn't look back again. When I reached the road, I flagged a passing car with shaking arms. The driver threw the door open, and I tumbled inside, coughing and sobbing. I pointed back, but the downpour obliterated everything. When I caught my breath, I asked him to drive, to anywhere but there. I never went back for my things. The bungalow stands empty now, its windows dark, its clock hands frozen at midnight. Sometimes I see it on my nightly drives home, its porch light flickering like a warning. I've moved 3 times since then, but I still wake at exactly 12, my phone vibrating with an alarm I didn't set. And late at night, when the rain falls hard, I swear I hear the faintest chime echoing through my bones, and a whisper in my ear that says, your time starts now. The first time I saw my reflection hesitate, I laughed it off as fatigue, and so did my eyes, until I realized how wrong they'd been. I arrived at Mirror Lake just before sunset, the sky bleeding rose and violet across the still water. The deep forest pressed in on three sides, firs and maples tangled together like ancient sentinels. A single dirt road wound in from the highway, erasing all signs of civilization. I parked my Jeep under a canopy of branches, grabbed my pack, and followed a narrow trail to the water's edge. The air smelled of pine resin, damp earth, and something older, something that lurked beneath the polished surface of that glassy lake. I set up camp on a flat spit of grass, close enough that I could dip my hand in the water without getting my boots wet. Without thinking, I peered into the lake, studying my reflection. Tired eyes, stubbled jaw, hat pulled low against the chill. I waved, and my reflection waved back, only there was a fraction of a second's delay. I frowned. Perhaps my mind was playing tricks, the way it sometimes did after long hours hiking alone. I shook my head and returned to setting up the tent. By the time I finished, twilight had deepened into indigo. I lit a small campfire, the crackle of wood and the musk of smoke a welcome comfort. I boiled water for instant coffee and settled on a log, staring into the flames, letting exhaustion pull at the corners of my mind. Somewhere behind me the forest sighed, leaves whispering secrets I could not decipher. The lake lay calm and unreadable in the distance. I stirred my coffee and glanced up. In the firelight, shapes danced among the trees, branches that might have been fingers, shadows that might have been faces. I blinked and they were gone. My heart thudded. I told myself that this was solitude talking, that I was safe. After all, I was miles from any trailhead used by hikers. No one ever ventured here. I was alone with my thoughts, my camera, and whatever it was that lingered in the darkness. Sleep came fitfully. My dreams were tangled. I dreamed I peered into the water and saw not my own face, but a pair of dull, glassy eyes staring back with languid malevolence. In another dream, I dove under the surface to touch my reflection, and instead felt cold, rotting scales. I awoke with my heart pounding, sweat chilling on my skin, convinced that I'd heard whispering just beyond my tent. But when I budged the flap, there was nothing but the silent forest and the impossibly still lake. Morning light was a relief. I brewed fresh coffee and examined the lake's edge. The water was too perfect, as though someone had polished its surface by hand. There were no ripples, not even from the breeze. I dangled a toe in, felt its icy grip, then pulled back. Then I noticed the footprints, two set, side by side, leading from my tent to the shoreline. Only I hadn't been down here in the night. I traced my fingers through the shallow, muddy edge, nothing but my own prints. I stared across the water, half expecting to see someone standing there, mirrored in the glass. Of course, there was no one. I spent most of the day circumnavigating the lake, mapping the shoreline with my GPS, checking for hidden paths or signs of other campers. Nothing. The forest was pristine. No human debris, no discarded cans, no charred coals from another fire. As evening fell, I felt a mounting tension, as though the lake waited for darkness to reveal its true nature. I resisted the urge to stare at that flawless surface, but by late afternoon I found myself drawn back again and again, watching my reflection in silence. On the third night, I dared to bring a mirror down to the water's edge. By torchlight, I positioned it at an angle, expecting to see only my face repeated. Instead, the lake's reflection wavered as though disturbed by ripples, though the water remained motionless. My mirrored image in the hand mirror flickered, stretched, and briefly smiled when I did not. I dropped the mirror, the crack echoing like a gunshot. My heartbeat roared in my ears. I stumbled back, tripped on a root, and the mirror shattered at my side. When I looked up, I was alone. The lake sat unmoving, dark and inscrutable. That night, the air felt charged like the moment before a storm. I huddled in my sleeping bag, sleeping with one eye open. At 3:17 a.m., I awoke to the faintest sound, a soft splash, as if someone had just dipped a finger into the water. I froze, listening. Nothing. The minutes stretched. I closed my eyes and told myself I was imagining it. But the moment I drifted back towards sleep, I heard it again. A deliberate, measured splash coming closer. I crawled out of the tent, heart racing so hard I could feel the pulse in my throat. I grabbed my flashlight and crept to the lake's edge. The beam cut through the dark to reveal footprints in the damp mud, human footprints, indented and glistening with dew, trailing off into the water so that they ended abruptly at the shoreline. No exit marks. It was as if whoever or whatever had walked across the surface of the earth vanished at the water's edge. My breath hitched. I shone the flashlight over the black water. It was like staring into an abyss. No bottom visible, no insect skimming the surface, no mirror-like sheen. Just endless dark. I stumbled back to my tent and spent the rest of the night wide awake, listening for splashes, whispers, footsteps. At dawn, I packed up and drove to the nearest town for food and signal. My hands shook as I scrolled through messages, as though a static current ran beneath my skin. I bought extra supplies, jerky, ramen, soda, and stared at the sky, trying to calm my mind. I told myself I'd return, pack up, and head home. Get some sleep, maybe see a doctor. This place had gotten under my skin. I needed to leave. But that evening, I found myself on the road again, headlights slipping past pine silhouettes. The lake called me back. Its perfect calm beckoned. I told myself I was strong, twice as careful. I would set up camp further away this time, keep my distance. I arrived at dusk, set my tent 50 yards from the water, and sat on a rock staring across the treetops. The lake lay placid, reflecting the moon as if it were a silver coin sunk beneath glass. I cracked open a beer and exhaled. Let it go, I thought. But something in the corner of my eye caught me, movement, almost imperceptible, beneath the surface. I squinted. The moonlight shimmered on stone like shapes drifting just below the water. Rocks? Logs? No, a face. The contours of a human face, eyes closed, as if asleep. Then the face pressed against the underside of the surface, eyes opening, staring right at me with a wet, blank gaze. My blood turned to ice. I swallowed, and the face vanished as though it had never been. The beer slipped from my fingers. I grabbed my flashlight and dashed to the shoreline. I lifted my legs over the mossy bank and got as close as I dared. Hello? My voice sounded small, swallowed by the trees. I scanned the water, but saw only my own reflection, perfectly still. No lapping waves, no drifting logs, only me staring back. I reached out a trembling hand. My reflection mimicked me in exact timing this time, no lag. So I jerked my arm violently. Nothing. My reflection stayed placid, mouth closed, eyes empty. Panic flared. I yanked my hand back, hearing it thud against the muddy shore. The reflection smiled. A slow, deliberate smile that did not match my terrified expression. I raised my flashlight so the beam sliced across the water, illuminating the reeds and submerged roots. Nothing moved, but in the edges of my vision, I felt something watching, a presence at my back. I spun around, but the forest was empty, only my campfire flickering. I realized I'd lost my camera. In my haste, I must have dropped it back at the tent. I couldn't leave it. My fingers shook, but I turned my gaze back to the lake. My reflection had tilted its head, as if curious. It beckoned with one finger, a tiny, hypnotic gesture. Come closer, it seemed to say. My mind rebelled, but my feet moved forward, drawn by some force I couldn't name. I stepped onto the bank. The mud was slick beneath my boots. I pushed through ferns and snags, edging closer until I was only inches from the surface. My reflection's hand pressed through the water's skin as though it were liquid glass, fingers splayed on the outside. It opened its mouth, wider than I could without feeling pain, and let out a sound like water through a broken dam. It gurgled my name. Jeremy. The voice was soft, coaxing, filled with longing. A sob broke free from my throat. I took another step, toes curling over the edge of the bank. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to turn, to run back to camp, but my legs wouldn't move. I leaned forward, drawn to that silent smile. My fingertips brushed the water. It rippled unnaturally, as though the surface were elastic. I stared down into that oily black mirror, into eyes that were mine but lacked soul. And then I felt it, a pull, gentle but irresistible, tugging at my arm, my shoulder, my very core. The water shimmered. The reflection's mouth opened wider, rows of glassy, serrated teeth glinting in the moonlight. It choked out a single word. Join me. My world narrowed to the space between me and that beckoning face. I closed my eyes, expecting cold water to rush over me. But instead I heard the snap of a twig behind me. I flinched and bolted upright. Moonlight gleamed on the blade held by a figure standing only a few feet away, another hiker, wild-eyed, skin pale as chalk. He wore a soaked flannel shirt and clutched a hunting knife. You can't do this, he rasped. Not again. He lunged and I stumbled back. In the flash of the knife's edge, I glimpsed a dark smear, blood, ink. The forest held its breath. I screamed, whatever courage I'd summoned vanishing. I turned and ran, crashing through undergrowth, ears ringing with my own ragged breathing. The stranger followed me, footsteps pounding. I didn't stop until I tripped over a root, face planting in the dirt. My hands clawed at the ground. I struggled to my knees and risked a glance over my shoulder. He stood on the bank, knife raised, eyes blazing in the flash of my headlamp. Don't look back, he bellowed. If you flee, it'll claim you. I scrambled upright and tore through the woods, branches whipping my face, robbing me of sense of direction. A blinding pain lanced through my ankle. I twisted it, but I kept going, fueled by terror. Finally, I burst onto the dirt road. The stranger materialized behind me, then halted at the tree line, knife lowered. His chest heaved, eyes fixed on the woods. I limped to the Jeep, keys shaking in my hand. I fumbled with the lock, then snarled the engine awake. As I peeled away, I dared a glance back. By the lake's edge, a shape stood, tall and still, a dark silhouette framed against the glassy water. It raised a hand in farewell. In the days since, I've tried to tell my story. Authorities found no footprints, no signs of another hiker, no knife. They chalked it up to exhaustion or hallucination. My rescue party searched the lake. No submerged bodies, no twist of steel. They even dredged the shallows. Nothing. I still have the scar on my ankle, the twisted tendon. I have the nightmares. Cold fingers wrapping around my throat as I float weightless beneath the surface, my lungs aching. Sometimes in the mirror, I see that smile in my own reflection. And sometimes, when I'm alone, I feel the pull again, gentle, inexorable, calling me back to the place where water becomes glass, and a reflection waits to claim your soul. So I warn you, if you ever find yourself drawn to a lake so still it looks like a polished mirror, resist the urge to stare. Never wave. Never smile back. And above all, never let your reflection beckon you closer, because once you do, the surface will shatter, and you will step through into something that looks just like you, but knows only hunger. Beware the mirror lake. It's waiting. The customers obey the rules. You won't. I learned the rules on my first night working the graveyard shift at Petromac's corner store. They were printed on a glossy card behind the counter, wedged between the receipt rolls and a stack of napkins. Refill the windshield fluid tank exactly halfway. Greet every visitor with "Welcome back." Burn the coffee grounds at 2 a.m. sharp. Lock the front doors if the temperature drops below 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Don't let the black cat in, ever. They seemed arbitrary until you realized each one held a hidden purpose. Once I saw what happened when they were broken, I understood why they were so insistent, and they never explained themselves. You just learn to trust the rules, until the night I broke two of them back to back. That evening began like any other. I punched in at midnight, flipped the sign to open, and blinked into the fluorescent glare. The store smelled of stale coffee and pine-scented cleaner. Outside, a damp breeze rattled the awning, the thermometer on the pump drifting down from 62 degrees Fahrenheit to 59.8 degrees Fahrenheit. I paused at Rule 4. Lock the front doors if the temperature drops below 60 degrees Fahrenheit. It was 12:03 a.m., and I watched the brass handle stubbornly refuse to turn. I sighed, but resisted the urge to flip the locks early. The toaster oven's timer beeped. It was time to burn the grounds. I ladled yesterday's used coffee grounds into the little steel tray, slid it into the oven, and pressed the ignition. Rule 3. Burn the coffee grounds at 2 a.m. sharp. I glanced at my watch. 12:05 a.m. Hours to kill. I refilled the chips and candy, sprayed disinfectantum on the countertops, wiped the fogged windows. A half-empty jug of windshield fluid sat in the refill bay. At 1:15 a.m., I topped it to exactly the halfway mark. Rule 1. Check. The first customer arrived at 12:45 a.m. A college kid in a stained hoodie, eyes bloodshot, who needed Doritos and a Monster Energy drink. I slid them across the counter, smiled, and mouthed, "Welcome back." He nodded, too wired to speak, then stumbled back into the night. Rule 2. Check. An hour later, at 1:50 a.m., a man in a suit and tie glided in. In the pale glow, his shadow elongated against the linoleum. He carried a leather briefcase that rattled when he set it on the counter. He asked for 2 cigarettes. Yes, single sticks. And I shook my head. Rule 5. No free cigarettes. I frowned as he stared at me, but refused. He pressed a quarter onto the counter, reserved for the register, and still remained silent. I gave him a pack, took his quarter, and forced a welcome back. His lips curled into a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. He left without a word. Rule 3 and Rule 5 intact. I watched the clock tick closer to 2 a.m. At 1:59, the oven clicked off. I opened it carefully, the acrid stench of charred grounds rolling into my nostrils. I dumped the ashes into the bin labeled "Ashes Only." Rule 3. Complete. Now it was time to lock the front doors. I checked the thermostat on the wall, 59.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Perfect. I pressed the latch button and felt the handles click shut. The little neon open sign flickered off. The station was officially sealed against the creeping cold. That was when I saw him, a pale kid in a black hoodie standing 4 feet away from the locked glass doors. He tapped lightly on the pane. My heart spiked. He shouldn't be there. No one should. Yet his eyes glinted with a childlike curiosity. I stepped forward. "Hey, sorry," I called through the glass, voice clipped. "We're closed." He raised a hand, pressed his palm flat against the cold glass. He looked different. His skin was too pale, eyes too bright. A set of whiskers scratched at my cheek on the inside of the window, like a cat's. I blinked. Nope, definitely a kid. "Can I come in?" he asked softly, voice echoing. The breeze rattled the trees outside, sending a swirl of dead leaves against the glass. I stepped back. Rules. I was not supposed to greet anyone after locking the doors. Rule 2's window closed when the doors clicked shut. And Rule 5. Don't let the black cat in, ever. Yet here was a kid, pressing his face to the pane as if he belonged here at 2:01 a.m. I could let him wander off, but something about his posture, the tilt of his head, made me uneasy. I flicked the sign back to open without thinking. The doors clicked, and I heard a faint mewing behind me. I spun to see a sleek black cat slip in through the air gap where the heavy rubber gasket met the threshold. It padded silently across the floor, whiskers quivering, its eyes reflecting the overhead lights like dull moons. The kid in the hoodie slipped through behind it. Rule 4. I'd locked the doors. But the doors were now ajar. A wave of dread crashed over me. I'd broken 2 rules in one go. I forced my voice to steady. "Welcome back," I said, almost choking on the words. The kid froze, head tilted. "Thanks," he said, voice echoing unnaturally. The cat mewed at his side, and its tail twitched like a living whip. I felt the air shift. The temperature dropped. Signs of something wrong. The kid smiled, smearing rainwater across the glassy tile floor. He toddled toward the coffee station, eyes shining. The cat followed close behind. I wanted to shout, to rip the doors off their tracks, but I was rooted behind the counter. The kid reached the coffee brewer and tapped the dispense button. Black liquid gushed into a styrofoam cup, but instead of coffee it looked like oil, thick and glistening. The cat leapt onto the counter, claws clicking on the formica. I flinched as its gaze met mine. There was intelligence behind those yellow slits, and menace. I looked for the rule card. It was gone from its spot behind the counter, as if it had never existed. No ounce of laminated protection to cling to. The kid tilted the cup toward me. "New rule," he said softly. "Everyone gets their coffee at 2 a.m. I stumbled back. My hand trembled as I tried to pull at the drive-through speaker button, but it was static. The door lock button was dead. Even the neon sign flickered uncertainly. The kid chuckled, a high, clear note that rattled the fluorescent tubes overhead. I scrambled for the phone, but the handset dangled limp. No dial tone. Every fail-safe mechanism of the station had just unraveled. I felt hot breath on my neck. The cat had circled me and now leapt onto my shoulder, teeth grazing my ear. Its purr vibrated through my skull. "Drink," the kid said, holding the cup to my face. I shook my head, backing toward the rows of energy drinks, desperate for safety. The cat slid off my shoulder with a huff and dashed to the coffee station, vanishing behind the carafes. The kid followed, giggling. He reached beneath the counter and pulled out a small matchbox. I recognized it, the same brand I'd burned the grounds in hours ago. He flicked a match and held the tiny flame to the oil-dark coffee, which flared into cobalt blue fire. I covered my eyes. The heat licked at my fingertips. When I dared to look again, the kid had blown out the match. The blue flame curled around the cup and vanished into the air. The coffee station was empty, as though the brewer had never existed. Behind me, the cat hissed and the glass display behind the counter rattled. I turned and saw dozens of reflections in the candy bar case. My own, the kids, the cats. But between them were faces, pale, gaunt, eyes gleaming with hunger. They flickered in and out of focus like bad television reception. I realized with a chill that every customer I'd ever served was standing behind me in that reflection, even ones I didn't know by name. I backed into the freezer door. The cold inside was unnatural, the coils groaning like ghosts. I heard crawling, something scuttling on the floor. I dropped to my knees, hands on either side of the seal. I thought I could break free of this waking nightmare if I just held on. The kids' laughter echoed behind the door, slow and mocking. Then I felt the cat's weight on the doorframe, claws digging into the plastic. The freezer door swung open on its own and sucked us into its maw of ice. My breath crystallized on my eyelashes. The kid and the cat slipped inside with me. Inside, frost formed instantly on the ceiling, dripping crystalline shards to the floor. I felt hands, too many hands, pressing on my back, shoving me deeper among the frozen soup cups and popsicles. The kid dropped the matchbox, and it skittered across the ice. One of the gaunt faces from the display crouched beside me, its grin splitting open as though tearing reality itself. I scrambled to the door, my fingers numb. The kid's voice sounded right behind me. "You broke the rules." I slammed my shoulder into the seal. My coat snagged on a protruding wire. A scream, my own, echoed as I felt the cat brush past me, heading for the matchbox. Its eyes glowed an impossible gold. It flipped open the lid with its paw. Flames skittered across the ice, turning the floor to steam. I coughed, blinded by heat and frost. Then, in an instant, the freezer shut. Everything went white. My vision swam, and I felt weightless, as though floating between breaths. The cat's purr reverberated through the metal walls. The kid's last words faded. "Now you will obey." I woke up at dawn, lying on the tile floor in front of the freezer. My hair was matted, my uniform stiff with frost and ash. The doors were open. The neon open sign hung limply in the display window. The standpipes and hoses outside were dry, the thermometer resting at a stable 64 degrees Fahrenheit. No sign of the kid or the cat. I staggered to my feet. The rule card was back behind the counter, pristine and laminated. I reached out to take it down and froze at the bottom line, newly printed. "Don't fight inevitable change." I swallowed hard and crumpled the card in my hand. Every rule I'd followed, every one I'd broken, had led me here. I wiped my gloved hand on my jeans, squaring my shoulders. I flicked the open sign off, locked both doors, and turned the key in the register. Then I walked out into the empty forecourt, the morning sun warm on my face, and realized that the customers would obey the rules. I won't. I have no choice now but to let them in. I never believed in ghosts until I saw her standing right behind me in the mirror, fractured moonlight outlining her rib-thin frame and eyes wide with horror. I had moved into the old Edwardian townhouse 2 months ago, charmed by its tall ceilings, stained glass windows, and the antique oval mirror hanging above the fireplace in the parlor. From the moment I unpacked, the mirror fascinated me. It was too ornate to be modern, its gilded frame carved with twisting vines and half-hidden faces that seemed to leer when I wasn't looking directly at them. My friends joked that it looked like a portal, but I laughed it off. After all, I wasn't the kind to lie awake at night, worried about demons. That changed on the third night after daylight savings time. I'd gone to bed early, exhausted from moving boxes and scrubbing years of dust from every molding. At exactly 2:37 a.m., my eyes fluttered open. The house was silent. I rolled over, reached for the lamp on my nightstand, and froze. Reflected in the hallway mirror at the foot of my bed was someone else, a pale, frail woman draped in what looked like an old-fashioned nightgown, her hair tangled and matted. She stood motionless, as if carved from smoke. My pulse thundered against my ribs. 1,000 thoughts slammed through me at once. An intruder, sleep paralysis, a hallucination. I blinked, and she was gone. I convinced myself it was exhaustion. Desk deep in paperwork, I chided myself. Logical explanation, overwork, shadows. I stopped sleeping with the hallway light off, leaving a soft glow that banished all but the closest corners into darkness. The presence never returned in my bedroom, but the parlor, where the mirror hung, called to me. I began taking my laptop and coffee into the parlor each afternoon, working at the small desk facing the mirror. I told myself I needed the sunlight, the change of scenery. Whenever I glanced up, I'd catch the mirror's surface quivering, like ripples on water. But there was no breeze, no draft through closed windows. Once, my reflection hesitated as I raised a hand. My mirrored arm paused a fraction of a second before moving. I stared. The glass winked at me, and I turned away, heart pounding. By the time I noticed my reflection playing out tiny variations, smiling a touch too late, tilting its head when I stayed still, I was too afraid to leave the parlor. I convinced myself I was losing my mind, that lack of sleep was warping my senses. I started keeping a notebook beside me during the day, jotting down every oddity. Mirrored eyebrows raised 0.3 seconds late. Reflection's mug half-smile fades. But when I looked back, my scrupulous notes had twisted into jagged scrawls, ink smeared as if someone had rubbed it with damp fingers. The words were wrong, not what I'd written at all. I stopped recording. I stopped smiling at the mirror. At night, I taped over the glass with black trash bags, securing the edges with duct tape in a spiderweb pattern. If the threshold to another world existed, I refused to look. Sleep returned, but dreams clawed at me, visions of water-logged rooms, faces pressed to glass, lips mouthing silent pleas. Every time I woke, I felt the warmth of someone's hand cupping my own, only to find empty sheets. 3 days ago, I came home to find the trash bags torn down. The mirror stood fully revealed, my reflection staring back, pale and unblinking. My heart lurched. I reached out to confirm it was me. My fingers brushed the cool glass, and the reflection did too. But the eyes that stared back were too dark, hollowed, and in them lay a dreadful intelligence. I yanked my hand away and left the room. That night, I dreamed of a door, a low, arched door carved into black marble, set into the floor of the parlor. I knelt and reached for its handle. Cold metal, slick with moisture. As I opened it, tendrils of shadow coiled upward, the mirror's surface rippling like disturbed water. I heard a woman gasp, at last. Then I woke. Bleary-eyed, I stared at the ceiling. Moonlight edged the curtains. My phone read 3:14 a.m. I sat up. Something tugged at me, an urgent tug at my chest, drawing me toward the parlor. I tried to resist, but my feet carried me down the hall. The mirror made no sound as I stepped inside. I flicked on the lamp. The glass was still until it breathed. The surface swooshed, And instead of my reflection, I saw the same frail woman from that first night. Her nightgown hung in strips, skin pale as paper. She smiled sadly, as if relieved. Her eyes flicked down to my hand on the lamp switch, as though recognizing my soul in the motion. My blood went cold. "I'm here," I choked out, voice cracking. "Who are you?" My reflection, or her, tilted her head and pressed her palm to the inside of the glass. I found myself mimicking the movement on the outside. When our hands met at the same point, the glass pulsed as if alive. Vertigo spiraled through me. "I am you," she whispered, though her mouth didn't move. The sound slithered into my mind. "I am what you will become." I stumbled backward. "No, you're not me." Her lips curved into a sad smile. "I am. And I'm here to show you, to prepare you." I laughed, a broken sound. "Prepare me? For what?" She raised her hand, and the mirror darkened beyond the edges, like oil spreading across water. In the depths, I saw scenes from my life, yet they twisted into nightmares. Me at my own funeral, headstone cracked. Me alone in a mansion of mirrors, endlessly hunting a reflection that never matched. Me trapped behind glass, screaming to be let out. Each vision lasted only an instant, but I recognized the faces, the rooms. They were mine, my future. I clamped my hands over my ears to block the whisper of her voice. But the glass creaked, and I heard her chanting as though from a mile away. Slowly, I lowered my hands, unable to resist. The words etched themselves into my mind. "Midnight comes. The reflection stays. Break the glass, release the shade. One step across, and you will see a future locked within the mirror's key." I staggered back, vision swimming. A gust of wind rattled the windows, though I was certain they were all closed. Candlelight flickered from the hallway sconce, though none had been lit. The parlor grew cold, breath turning to mist. My reflection smiled. "Time is short." I tore myself away and fled down the hall, heart hammering. I barricaded the parlor door with a chair and a heavy side table. Leaning against it, gasping, I tried to steady my nerves. I couldn't think clearly. Half of me wanted to smash the mirror, chip away at it, shatter it into 1,000 glittering shards. The other half knew better. Some doors, once broken, cannot be closed again. I spent yesterday researching. The townhouse had once belonged to a stage magician in the 1920s, rumored to dabble in seances and spirit-binding illusions. Obituaries mentioned that his assistant, or lover, died in a bizarre accident on stage, her body crushed beneath collapsing scenery. Some whispered the magician trapped her soul in his enchanted mirror, glimpses of her silhouette seen by servants in the dead of night. I found a yellowed news clipping in the city archives, a grainy photograph of that very mirror, propped above the fireplace, the assistant's gaunt face white as chalk. By dusk, I knew what I had to do. I returned to the parlor with tools, rubber gloves, a pry bar, industrial cleaner, and blankets. My hands trembled so badly I spilled the can of cleaner across the rug. I almost walked away, but the cleaner ate through the fabric to reveal a faint engraving beneath. A single word carved into the wood paneling under the mirror's ledge: "Bind." My jaw dropped. "Bind." The word pulsed with power, as if daring me to act. Sweat beaded at my hairline. I gripped the pry bar and knelt. Under the mirror's frame, a slender seam ran between the glass and the wood. If the assistant's soul were bound here, perhaps I could unbind it by reversing the ritual, free her, close the portal, restore balance. But I sensed danger. The reflection had warned me, threatened me. Whatever lived on the other side would not go gently. I pressed the pry bar into the seam and levered gently. The glass creaked, and a face pressed out from within. My face, twisted in anguish, mouth open in a silent scream. I yanked back, nearly toppling over. The reflection's voice echoed. It's begun. I lunged forward, dragging the bar along the edge. The frame snapped free with a crack like a gunshot. I staggered, jarred, my ears ringing. The mirror tilted forward. The assistant's pale hand, fragile as glass itself, slipped from the edge and extended toward me. I froze, tears stinging my eyes. She looked at me with longing. Behind her, the dimensions of the mirror deepened into a yawning void. She whispered, "Help me." I watched her lips form that plea, as mournful as an ocean swell. Everything in me ached to reach out, to touch her cold hand and free her. "I will," I whispered. I knelt and grasped her wrist, pulling gently. The mirror's surface rippled, stretching like liquid silver. I braced myself and tugged harder. Suddenly, a burst of pain shot through my shoulder. I screamed, dropping the pry bar. A web of cracks spidered across the glass. The assistant's eyes widened in shock. My reflection, my proper reflection, the one that looked like me, popped into view at the opposite corner, betraying her by staring at me with tear-filled eyes. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came. With a final wrench, the mirror shattered. Shards rained down around me, tipping in slow motion. All at once, the parlor exploded in light. The assistant's hand slipped free. Her body solidified, collapsing to the floor in a heap of pale limbs. I stood, panting, staring at her still form. Then the light winked out. Darkness swallowed the room. I knelt and pressed my palm to her cheek, cold but alive. She stirred, eyes fluttering open, and smiled faintly. "Thank you," she breathed. A tremor shivered through the floorboards. I glanced up. Every shard of glass, every fragment of the mirror was reassembling itself in midair, weaving back into the gilded frame. The wall behind it rippled like water draining down a sink. In moments, the mirror hung whole again, flawless and silent. The assistant gasped, struggling to sit up. Behind her, the new mirror's surface shimmered, and I saw not her reflection, but mine, pale, hollow-eyed, smiling with relief. My reflection raised its hand, beckoning me closer, and in its dark eyes was the promise, "Your turn next." I scrambled to my feet, shielding the woman's fragile body with my arm. "Go," I whispered. "Just go." She nodded, expression frightened. I helped her to the door, praying she would leave this place forever. As I guided her past the threshold, the air turned thick and cold. I heard her gasp, then the echo of her name whispered in terrible pleasure, "Eleanor." I bolted the front door behind her, flinging the bolt and throwing myself against it as if bracing for an onslaught. Silence followed. Then footsteps. Soft, deliberate on the other side of the wood. I held my breath. The doorknob rattled once, twice, then stilled. I sank to the floor, sliding down until my back hit the door. My heart pounded so fiercely I thought I would burst. I waited until dawn. Then, hands shaking, I crept back to the parlor. The mirror glinted in the early light, perfectly intact. No cracks, no sign of the struggle. On the floor lay the assistant's nightgown, stained and torn, but nothing else. I knelt and pressed my palm to the glass. My reflection stared back, calm, as if mocking me. There was no depth to the surface, no whisper of liquid darkness. It was just glass, untouched, unmarked. And yet I knew it wasn't over. Because somewhere inside that flawless mirror, a piece of me had remained behind, trapped, fractured, destined to become her. I tasted bitterness on my tongue, anger at my own weakness. I had freed her, but at what cost? I left the townhouse that morning and never returned. I donated the antiques, sold the carpets, emptied the attic. I wanted every memory of that place erased. But in hotel rooms and borrowed apartments, I feel its pull. Whenever I wash my hands, blood from a kitchen mishap, a scratch from unloading groceries, I catch a glimpse of movement behind glass, a pair of sorrowful eyes. Maybe it's just a trick of light. Maybe it's my own guilt mirrored back at me. Last night, I dreamed of Eleanor again, standing behind me in a hallway of mirrors, her mouth opening, releasing a howl that filled my chest. I woke gasping, heart pounding, aware of a warm weight at the foot of my bed. My sheets were damp. I flipped on the light, nothing there. Then I caught sight of the bathroom mirror. In it, I saw her, my face, pale and hollow, lips curved in a sad, welcoming smile. I didn't dare move. I watched until the mirror rippled, and she leaned forward, her voice slipping through the glass. "Join me." I closed my eyes, and I heard the click of the door of every mirror in the building unlocking, just for me. They told me the rules would protect me. They lied. I first saw the laminated list taped to the back wall weeks ago, just after I'd been promoted from stocking shelves to the night clerk position. The station manager, Mrs. Calhoun, perched behind the counter like some silent warden, pointed at the list without looking up. "You follow these, you'll be fine," she said. Then she vanished through the metal door to her office, leaving me staring at 5 simple rules. Always keep one pump idle. Don't give out free single cigarettes. Leave a quarter in the register at all times. Close the bathroom door locked from the outside. Never say the word empty when talking about the tanks. Her reassurance echoed in my head as the sun dipped below the horizon and I flicked the open sign on. The lot lay empty in the failing light, save for a single sedan at pump 3, its engine humming softly. I grabbed my flashlight, taped the rules under the register monitor, and settled in to wait for whoever might wander in at midnight or later. The first few nights were boring. I made cups of coffee from the old percolator, wiped sticky floors, and watched late-night drivers speed in, pump gas, and leave without a word. I repeated the rules like a warding chant. Always keep pump 2 off. Never slip a lone cigarette through the dispenser. Feed the register a quarter if it bobbed under 10 cents. Lock the bathroom door. And if anyone asked if we were out of fuel, say running low or almost sold out, but never empty. I understood the sense behind some of them. Pump 2 had squealed and sputtered the week before, and a mechanic came once to tap on its innards before leaving a note. Idle for now. The cigarette machine jammed if I tried to slide a single stick under the dispenser. Something about the cents per pack code. The bathroom lock was loose, and once a homeless man tried to sleep inside. After that, I latched it firmly from the outside. Saying empty on the phone had once triggered a frantic call from the district office, so I learned to say temporarily unavailable. None of it felt supernatural, just annoying policies from higher-ups. On the night of my 14th shift, the wind had picked up, rattling the roof panels overhead. I closed the small back window behind the counter, taped tight with duct tape from the supply closet. The neon pumps glowed in the rain, 2 glowing red stripes circling each nozzle. I swept the parking lot as Mrs. Calhoun had reminded me. My flashlight beam caught something at pump 2, the barrier tape, bright orange and white, out of service bunting, twirling in the wind. I walked over to retie it. The tape's plastic clip lay on the ground. I picked it up, but I didn't examine the pump itself. I remembered Rule 1. Always keep one pump idle. I retied the tape and nodded to myself. All good. Inside, I rang up a late customer, an elderly man in a tan coat who bought 2 energy drinks and left without so much as a thank you. As soon as he stepped out, I heard scraping from just beyond the window. The bunting flapped, then stilled. Rain pattered on the roof. I peered through the glass. Pump two's nozzle handle had slipped out of its cradle and dangled as if tugged by a phantom hand. My heart thumped. I stepped outside in my sneakers and raincoat to rehook it. The hose was taut, leading back to the bowels of the pump. Yet the engine was silent. I yanked the nozzle free, and it clicked into place. The pump's display blinked off in pale green. I patted it, murmuring a silent apology, then returned inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, the overhead fluorescent lights flickered. My breath caught. The clock's red digits read 1:14 a.m. The storm raged outside, thunder grumbling low. Somewhere behind the stockroom door, I heard a metallic click as if the lock had engaged itself. Rule 4. Close the bathroom door lock from the outside. I frowned. Why would the bathroom lock? I stood and crossed to the hallway. The bathroom door was closed. I pressed the handle. It rattled, locked. I exhaled. It must have been the wind. I turned the knob from the outside, slid the bolt, and flicked the light inside off and on. Nothing. Locked but empty. I laughed nervously and tiptoed back to the counter. Then the phone rang, shrill and urgent. I dabbed at a bead of sweat on my temple. Rule 5. Never say empty when talking about the tanks. I picked up a scratchy voice. Gas. Well, why? But the line hissed and the call dropped. I stared at the handset. The screen on the pump display blinked low across the lot. The other pumps glowed normally. I tapped the phone's cradle and whispered, "We're running low," though I wasn't sure to whom. A sudden crash jolted me. I looked up to see a stack of empty propane canisters off their cart, strewn across the supply alcove. They lay on the concrete floor, dented and leaking vapor. I backed away. The smell stung my nose. The storm pounded the roof. I turned to call my manager, her number saved under boss, but my phone was dead. No signal. The lights flickered again, and the register beeped with a paper jam warning. Panic flared, but I reminded myself. Rules. I grabbed a pack of gloves, slid across the propane canisters, and reset the cart. I replaced the yellow hazard tape. Outside, I caught movement. A figure limping toward pump 2, coat drenched, hood drawn. I yelled, "Hey!" But the figure paused, lifted its head, and the hood fell away. A woman's face, pale as moonlight, streaked with rain. Her eyes were wide, black as ink, features drained of life. She pointed at the nozzle. "I need gas," she whispered. I gaped. The nozzle at pump 2 flashed off. I shook my head. "Sorry, pump 2's out of service," I said, voice trembling. I gestured to pump 1. "You can use." I swallowed, ripping my eyes from hers. I remembered Rule 1 meant exactly 1 idle pump. If I directed her to pump 1 or pump 3, I'd violate the rule. But better than making pump 2 live again. I pointed at pump 4. "Try over there." She tilted her head. "No," she said, voice an oily hiss. Pump 2. Her hand drifted toward the barrier tape. I blocked her. It's broken, I insisted. I'm sorry. I felt she studied me, her expression unreadable. Then the sky rumbled, and a bolt of lightning split the night. For a heartbeat, I saw the barrier tape move on its own, peeling off the pump and wrapping around the hose. The woman whimpered. She slipped off her hood, and under the coated fabric I saw bruises blooming across her scalp, eyes swollen shut. She rasped, "Feel it." Pain laced her words. I stepped back, trembling. She pressed her hand to the glass of the attendant's booth. Rainwater dripped down her arm, pooling on the concrete. She whispered again, "Pump 2. Feel it." I shook my head and ran inside, slamming the door. I fumbled for the radio. Static. I banged on the counter. "Help!" Someone's at. The lights died. Pitch black. The storm outside crescendoed. I froze, unable to move. My breath sounded deafening in the sudden vacuum of power. Then the lights flickered back to life. The window by the counter showed an empty lot. No barrier tape. No pale woman. I whirled around. The radio crackled, shut it down. A voice breaking in and out. I balanced on the balls of my feet. Outside, the pump stuttered, then clicked on. The barrier tape lay loosely on the ground, raining small stones onto the asphalt. Pump 2's nozzle gleamed, beckoning. The display blinked. Ready. A tightening in my chest. The rule was violated. The mechanic's note said, "Idle." Not ready. My fingers shook as I reached for the barrier tape. I yanked it up and wrapped it around the pump guardrail, tying a sloppy knot. I whispered, "Always keep one pump idle," but my voice hitching gave me away. I stepped away and peered through the rain-streaked window. A droplet raced down the glass, but something behind it moved too. A wide silhouette draped in soaked fabric, standing beside pump 2. The lights flickered, and I blinked. It was gone. I backed away. The register beeped. I looked down to see my precious quarter missing from the coin tray. Rule 3. Leave a quarter in the register at all times. I counted the change. Nothing. My hand slipped to the lamp, but it wouldn't turn on. The overhead lights buzzed. I rummaged under the register, finally finding a quarter wedged beneath the paper receipt. I dropped it back into the tray, heart racing. "Don't say the word empty," I whispered to myself, but my mouth was dry. The pager chirped a summons. 3 long beeps. I should ignore it. No instructions for the pager, but curiosity won. I hit the button. A text scrolled. "Meet me at pump 2. Meet me." My chest clenched. I looked at the barrier tape. It slackened. I had to decide, defy the rule and step outside, or stay safe behind the glass. My legs shook. I remembered how the woman's eyes had bored into me. I remembered the storm's roar, the unleashed power of the pump. The pager beeped again. "Help me." I bolted for the door and yanked it open. Rain gusted in, soaking my hair and soaking the floor. I slipped on a puddle and fell hard onto my back. Pain lanced through my ribs. I coughed, gasping. Pump 2 stood before me. No barrier, no warning. The nozzle dangling free. The display blinked. The wind howled, flapping an imaginary door. I crawled forward, each inch a battle against the ache in my side. I reached the pump guard and froze. On the ground lay a chipped porcelain toe, painted red, the kind you might see on a mannequin. Next to it, a smear of something dark, like oil or blood. A voice whispered in my ear, "Pump 2." I flinched and spun around. No one. The rain beat down. The storm crackled overhead. I looked back at the pump. The hose had coiled across the slick concrete. The nozzle lay pointed toward me like a snake's head. I sank to my knees. What had I unleashed? The rules, simple policies, had been my shield. Now I stood defenseless in the storm's wrath. My head swam as thunder cracked, and in the neon glow I thought I saw something perched atop the pump, a shadowed figure with hollow eye sockets and long, spidery fingers gripping the metal. I closed my eyes. I recited the rules one last time. Always keep one pump idle. Don't give out free single cigarettes. Leave a quarter in the register at all times. Close the bathroom door lock from the outside. Never say the word empty when talking about the tanks. I opened my eyes. The nozzle was gone. The porcelain toe lay just out of reach. The ground beneath me trembled. The shadowed figure tilted its head and hissed, its mouth a cavern of darkness. I scrambled backward, pressing myself against the station's wall. Rain sluiced over my shoulders. The lights inside the booth flickered, then died. My breath fogged in front of me. The figure drifted forward. I swallowed, voice hollow. I followed the rules. It stopped, and for a heartbeat the world stilled. Rain paused mid-drop. Thunder held its breath. Then the figure lunged, and everything went black. I found that note taped to the underside of the register platform during my very first shift at Harlan's 24 or by 7 Fuel and marked. It wasn't on any official employee handbook or posted behind the counter where the other rules lived. Instead, it was etched hastily in what looked like permanent marker on a scrap of cardboard. No sales after 12. Never turn off the neon sign. Always ring up the same code, 6666, for the guy in the trench coat. If you see shadows crawling on the ceiling, hand them a pack of matches. Don't let anyone use the payphone under the awning. My manager, a gaunt man named Wes with shuttered eyes and a voice like gravel, had only said, "Stick to the rules and you'll survive. Don't ask questions." He gave me no walkthrough of the store's systems beyond the register codebook, and he certainly didn't teach me which drawer held the matches. That scrap of cardboard was my guide. I took it as an eccentricity, a local legend, something to amuse me on a 5-hour shift. Then I glanced at the clock. 11:53 p.m. 3 more minutes until midnight. 3 more minutes to see how serious these rules really were. The gas station was perched on the edge of town, the only business lit for miles along Highway 53. To the north, I could see the red glow of the neon-lit pumps. To the south, a forsaken stretch of black asphalt. Inside, the store was a capsule of fluorescent hum. Rows of canned energy drinks, racks of neon candy, and a glass-doored fridge full of V8 Fusion and off-brand sodas. The only person I had seen all day was a jittery kid in a hoodie who'd bought a bag of beef jerky 30 seconds before close. Wes locked up 15 minutes ago and disappeared into his apartment above the store. My phone sat by the register. but his vague survive advice made me hesitate to call for help if things went south. At 11:59, I adjusted the neon sign's pull chain at Wes's insistence. Rule 2. Never turn it off. The big red open buzzed defiantly against the night. Then the clock struck midnight. The second hand swept to the 12 with a metallic click. I exhaled. Nothing happened. My relief was short-lived. A muffled thump rattled through the ceiling tiles above the magazine rack, like someone dragging their fingernails slowly through sheetrock. I glanced up, heart thudding. The ceiling was smooth and white, no wires exposed, but the smell of dust and mold wafted down. Royford, if you see shadows crawling on the ceiling, hand them a pack of matches. I scanned the rafters. No flicker, no darkness moving, but I felt eyes on me. I frowned, leaned forward, and opened the match drawer hidden under the register platform. The blue cardboard box felt weighty, stuffed full of wooden sticks. I closed my eyes for a moment, thankful I didn't actually have to hand matches to anything. I clipped it back and forced a laugh. I was on edge. Night shift jitters. At 12:05, the bell above the door jingled. I glanced at the door camera monitor. No one in the frame. Then it jingled again, and the door handle turned slowly. A man drifted in. He looked like he just crawled out of a ditch. Bloodshot eyes, matted hair, a long trench coat that had seen better decades. He leaned on the counter, one pale hand braced against the plastic formica. His other hand clutched a crumpled paper bag. The usual, he rasped, voice like gravel sliding down tin. I tensed. I'm sorry, sir. Can I help you? I kept my eyes on him, trying to make sense. He pushed the bag toward me. Inside, I glimpsed a half-eaten sandwich, some loose change, and what looked like a black matchbox. The overhead lights flickered once more. Shadows coalesced at the corners of the store, creeping along the ceiling tiles in slow, deliberate patterns. I squeezed my eyes shut, recalling Rule #4. I opened the drawer, lifted out a single matchstick, and pressed it into his palm. His fingers closed around it. Thank you, he murmured, scanning the aisles beyond me. Now we can begin. I swallowed, but my throat was dry. Sir, your total is... I scanned his items. $275. He produced a battered metal token from his pocket and slid it across the counter. Ring up code 6666, he said, voice flat. My heart skipped. Rule #3. Ring up code 6666 for the guy in the trench coat. I punched in the numbers. The register dinged, and the screen flashed an item name. Echo. He paid, unfolded his coat slightly, revealing a dark stain blossoming across his shirt. It looked like old ink or dried blood. He grabbed the bag and backed away, but he didn't leave. He stood by the doorway, staring out into the night. The neon pumps buzzed outside, and through the glass I saw shapes flicker, figures pacing between the columns of light. I blinked, and they were gone. The man's eyes met mine. Don't let them inside, he said. Then he slipped out the door, and the bell jingled softly behind him. I exhaled so hard my shoulders rose and fell. A bead of sweat slipped down my temple. The store felt too still. the hum of the lights too loud. I wiped my palms on my pants. The clock read 12:12 a.m. Rupert. No sales after 12. That meant I should have refused him outright. But I didn't. I followed the rules instead, and I felt the weight of my decision settle over me like a stain. I wandered the aisles, checking expiration dates, refilling chips, but my hands shook. I thought about locking the front door until morning, but that would violate Ruhatu if it meant turning off the open sign. The door handle rattled and I jumped. No one was there. At 12:30, the doorbell rang again. A gust of cold wind hit me, and I smelled damp earth. On the sidewalk stood a woman in an old-fashioned dress, hair braided tightly around her skull, and eyes as black as oil. She clutched a small box tied with string. "I want a soda," she said. I glanced at the clock. Rule #1 had already passed. I hesitated. "I'm sorry, ma'am. No sales after midnight." She tilted her head. "That's not what the rules say." Her voice bounced off the walls in an unsettling echo. I shook my head, stepping back. "I can't." Her smile spread slowly across her face. It was too wide, too sharp. She raised the box. "Then let me in. Give me the matches you kept." I realized with cold dread that she meant the same matchbox the trench coat man had left behind. I whipped the drawer open, yanked it out, and thrust it toward her. Rule #4. I had no choice. The box rattled as I handed it to her. Her fingers were unnaturally long and thin, and as she closed her hand around it, she hissed, "Thank you." Then she vanished. No jingle, no door opening. One moment she was there. The next the aisle was empty. My legs refused to hold me. I stumbled backward, nearly hitting the register. The matchbox sat on the floor where she dropped it, unopened, but glowing faintly from within. I stared at it, every nerve ending a light. Then another flicker overhead. The ceiling shadows writhed again. I dropped to my knees and slammed the drawer shut, afraid to face what crawled above me. I scuttled behind the counter, heart hammering, web of rules scrawled across my mind. At 1:15, a siren wailed distant and low. It sounded like an ambulance, but the pitch warped until I couldn't tell. The pumps outside glowed red, blue, red, blue in an unholy rhythm. The humming light stuttered, then went out. The neon open sign flickered once, then pulsed, bright, dim, bright, dim. Total darkness swallowed the store except for that throbbing neon. In that pulse, I saw shapes, faces pressed against the glass doors, their mouths opening in silent screams. I covered my ears, but the sound didn't stop. It thrummed against my skull, sinking with the neon's beat. I forced myself to stand. I remembered Rule 5. Don't let anyone use the payphone under the awning. That meant I had to go outside. I gripped the door handle, turned it, and stepped out into the rain-slicked night. The air tasted of rust and gasoline. The payphone hung under the awning, its receiver missing. The cord dangled like a broken spine. Then I heard it, a soft click behind me. I whirled around. The trench coat man stood by pump 3, matchstick glowing between his lips like a dying ember. His eyes bore into me. You broke rule #1 and #3, he said. His voice was flat. Impossible. And you gave our friend the matches. Now the phone is broken. We hungry. My breath caught. I don't understand. He exhaled flame that flickered orange in the dark. Shadows spilled from his coat pockets, pooling at his feet and slithering toward the payphone. The telephone cord coiled and twined across the concrete like a serpent. The black-clad woman emerged from the shadows near pump 7, holding her box aloft, opening it to reveal hundreds of matchsticks. Behind me, the store windows steamed, faces pressed against the glass, mouths shaping silent words I couldn't decipher. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed back on, and something crawled across the ceiling panels. A dozen figures, limbs angular and spindly, skittering like insects. I flinched and ran back into the store, slamming the glass door behind me. The display racks rattled as if someone rushed by. I scrambled to the fuse box and yanked the main breaker. The lights died. The humming ceased. Silhouettes coalesced in the darkness. Then I heard the old pump's motor engage outside. A low gurgle of fuel. I knew which rule I had to follow next. Rule 2. Neon must stay on. I sprinted to the neon sign switch. It was off. My hands shook violently. I flipped it on. The sign flickered to life. The store glowed. The shadows recoiled. The trench coat man's voice echoed through the glass. Thank you. Then a single match flared in the darkness beyond the door. The phone under the awning sparked and crackled. The black woman pressed her palm against the glass, bones visible through skin, her mouth opening in a grin. I lunged for the register, tearing up the cardboard note. I ripped out the scrap with the rules and swallowed it. I screamed so loudly it startled me. In the neon glare, I saw them, the creatures from the ceiling, slide through the shelves in silence, like ink spilled in water. I dove under the counter and covered my head. The ground trembled as if the earth itself registered my terror. The bell jingled, the door opened, and cold rain washed across the floor. Then a voice, crisp and commanding. Wes? Is that you? My head jerked up. Wes stood in the doorway, flashlight beam carving through the darkness. He shielded his eyes from the neon. What the hell? Why is the sign still on? He strode in, yanking the neon switch off. Instantly, the store went dark again. A chorus of hisses answered him. The creatures froze, then rushed toward us in a writhing mass. Wes fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a ring of keys. He jammed the register key, yanked the drawer open, and slammed it into the breaker box. Sparks flew. The power cut. I heard the creatures skittering, scrambling, panicked. I gripped Wes's arm. He looked at me, eyes hard. You left the sign on. You handed them the matches. His voice was distant, as if filtered through water. I shook my head. I had to. The rules. I pointed to the spot where the scrap of cardboard had been. He spat on the floor. Those aren't rules. They're instructions on how to keep them locked out. He jabbed at the ceiling. This station sits on a tear between worlds. The neon and the power hold the latch shut. If you give them what they want, matches, phone access, permission, any breach, they flood through. I swallowed the lump in my throat. And the trench coat man? He sighed, flipping the switch back on. The sign buzzed defiantly. He's one of us. A ward. He feeds them scraps to keep them hungry enough to stay contained. He shrugged. Better kept busy than let loose. I stared at him. What about me? Wes reached into his coat and produced a new scrap of cardboard. He set it on the register. It read, "Keep neon on. Never open after midnight. Feed the warden code 6666. Offer matches if shadows stir. Do not ring phone." He met my eyes. You don't survive by following the rules. You survive by knowing why they matter. That night, I learned the job wasn't about selling gas or slinging snacks. It was about maintaining a barrier between our world and something hungry beyond the pumping lights. Every matchstick handed over, every code entered, every flicker of neon, they all held the darkness at bay. I clocked out at dawn, shaking. Wes took over without a word. The creature's murmurs drifted lost behind the humming lights. The store doors locked. The neon sign blinked one last time before clicking off. As I walked to my car, I glanced back at the darkened pumps, the silent march of daylight erasing the night's terrors. I knew I'd return, because someone had to keep the latch strong, and because, better or worse, I had no choice but to learn the rules and keep them.